This week's episode is sponsored by Common Sense. Given the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic, Ben and I are recording remotely. Please practice social distancing and wear a mask in populated public spaces. Thank you. Now, on to this week's episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gears and Grades, the student driven podcast. This is episode 2. I am one of your hosts, Ben Bell, joined as per usual by my co host, Jeremy Honess. How are you doing today, Jeremy?
Hi there, I'm doing well, thanks. This episode is feeling pretty great, but also feeling pretty loose because, as you may or may not know, you probably won't know, we don't really have a proper solid plan. But we are definitely going to be talking about a bit about ourselves and probably some interesting little tidbits here and there from the past week. But without further ado, Ben, would you like to start things off?
Yeah, as Jeremy said, this is going to be a bit of a lighter week. Jeremy and me are both somewhat metaphorically drowning in finals right now with school. So we're just doing a bit of an easier week. Also, we both have been checking in on news and stuff. Not much really going on in the auto industry right
Mm.
now. Ironic, as last week there was so much news and we had this huge blowout episode, which worked out for episode 1.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah, this week there's not much going on in the industry. It's a bit of a dead week. So yeah, Jeremy, as he said, we're just going to go through a little bit of our background in some, previous, I guess, rough works and things like that. We'd tried some stuff like this, but officially under the podcast, we don't have any real background on each of us yet. So we thought today we'd kind of give you guys a little bit of backstory about us. Both the vehicles we've owned, hope to own, a little bit about us, car culture, our involvement in that, us as people, just kind of a basic little biography for who you're listening to on this here podcast. But yeah, just to
yeah.
get started today, start off with our usual kind of bullshit corner here and start going through some of our fun stuff going on. So yeah, this week, it's officially December 1st at the time of this recording.
Woo.
So we're getting into the winter months. Really, we're really into the thick of it here in Ontario. I guess a little bit about us. I don't know if it came up at all in episode 1 here, but Jeremy and me both are located in Southern Ontario, Canada. Jeremy in Toronto, me in London, a couple hours south of the city right now. And yeah, so obviously being in Canada, while not living in igloos, it is cold now that we're into
Oh yeah.
December, and the snowfall is really starting. Getting a pretty good amount now, off and on. Did you guys get a lot of snowfall at all the last couple of days, Jeremy?
Actually, last night it was snowing a fair amount. Actually, we had some snow, but when I went out there and shoveled, I didn't. I noticed that the snow just sort of melted as you were shoveling it, so wasn't really sticking. It's mainly sticking on rooftops and grass, so to speak. It's not really sticking around. And geez, Louise, it's been cold. I went out there today to do some to get some shots for one of my assignments, and holy crap, I couldn't feel my hands. Like, it's just so cold. I think it was -1 today, at least for us. And I know you're probably thinking, or most Canadians are probably thinking, that's not so bad. Well, we've been cooped up inside a lot, and my house is actually fairly warm. So being outside, I know this is first world problems. Uh, being outside was a little bit of a shock to my body, it was really just sort of a feeling of like, whoa, winter is really here. So I don't know about you, Ben. Have you experienced the cold?
Yeah, it's definitely not horribly bad, but I know here, yeah, it was the same thing. -1 feels like -12 or 13. So wind chill had it a lot colder too
Yeah,
than
the
it
wind
really
chill.
was saying, which I think added a bit to that feeling. And as you said, it's that whole getting used to both being indoors, and I feel like it's always a running joke with Canadians. In November 1st, you roll up in 3 coats on top of you, and you're freezing cold. And first day of spring when it hits 0 degrees again, we're all going to walk outside in t-shirts and
Yeah.
complain and talk about how nice and warm it is, because we seem to always have that opposite effect kick in. So yeah, it's definitely getting a little bit chillier. I know Toronto never seems to get as much snow as really anywhere else in Ontario. Particularly, it seems to just melt. I assume that the condensed nature of the city center, not much grass to really absorb anything. I presume something has to do with that. But
Yeah.
I found when I lived there, we never got the biggest snowfalls, and if we did it, whatever amount it would be, it would always be worse in the horseshoes, so to speak, of
Yeah.
Ontario. Um, and London is in one of those pockets where we're kind of in a channel with the Great Lakes where we get quite a bit of snow, above average. Not as bad as Barrie or some other places like that. For any fellow Ontario folk, you'll know how bad Barrie gets. Um, But yeah, we got a pretty good amount last night, probably about 15, maybe 20 centimeters overall by the time I'm looking out the window now,
Oof.
and made for some good snow shenanigans. I went out driving last night, took a couple pictures of the car downtown in the winter, did some parking lot fun. I unfortunately don't have any captured imagery of it, but I was testing the old donut skills and things like that with my new rear brake assembly I put in this summer,
Very nice.
and slowly perfecting the Jetta's drift game. The wagon rotates completely different than my old Golf diesel used to do in the winter, so I've been trying to like kind of have to relearn how to drive that car in the snow fun and like really get the back end to step out. It weighs so much that you really have to force the weight over the kind of weight transfer to get that back to step,
Mhm.
because the car makes so little power, obviously. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of short distance, quick turn of the wheel, yank the e-brake to get her to step out. But she did pretty well last night in the old bad weather, And that brings me actually to the first little thing I want to talk about and pull up, since we've got this fancy newfangled tech now, Jeremy and me, where we
Ooh.
can share our screens. So for those at home, hopefully this goes smoothly. Keep bear in mind this is our first delving into video here, so I'm not sure how well they shall really be working.
Oh, that's
But
nice. Oh, yeah, I can see it. It's working well.
perfect. So here's some images I've got going. I grabbed of my car last night, and yeah, it's just got a couple snow pictures and nice little selfie in there.
Yeah.
Um,
I wasn't gonna say anything, but who?
you know what my face looks like from the video anyway, so it's fine.
That's true.
Don't worry, I was actually dressed in that picture, so don't worry about it, folks. You're not seeing anything too sketchy. But yeah, this is there was some new construction in downtown London recently, and they did this cool little cobblestone paving on Dundas Street, which is kind of our main road. Um, as probably a lot of people in Ontario live with, because I feel like Dundas stretches across all of Ontario at this point.
Yeah,
Uh, but yeah, this is our kind of downtown city center. So I took a couple cool like little pictures just with the new construction, pulled over in the snow, just kind of some quick point and shoot stuff. But this one I think turned out really well with like kind of the snow, combing across the screen and stuff. I'm quite a fan of this one
that is
for
really nice.
a crappy little winter beater car.
Almost
Uh,
wallpaper material right there.
Exactly. And yeah, for I guess for anyone also who doesn't know, this is my winter car, or I guess now my only car. I keep having to mentally adjust to that saying that. Um, this is my 2004 Jetta wagon, diesel, 5-speed BW. Unfortunately, not the ALH. But overall, it's been pretty good to me over the last couple of years. Maybe I shouldn't say it's been, could be worse, could be meaner than it has been. So yeah, I got a couple of nice like little pictures of that thing out in the snow. Can't remember actually if I shared this one or not there in that bulk of images, but got another front corner
That's
picture
really
too.
nice.
But yeah, it turned out pretty good for just some quick point and shoots. The snow always creates cool reflections in these nice little Christmas lights they've thrown up now. I almost wish they had a little bit more gear to really sell the holiday look, but or if it was
Yeah.
more of a populated time and didn't look like the COVID ghost town it is, but it's creates for some cool imagery. And of course, it wouldn't be -1 degrees for the first time ever if I didn't have to start my diesel to move it today.
Ooh,
I captured this one for you folks on my Snapchat here, but I imported the video over just so you could all see it. And this is the time of year, as I say in the snap post here, where really all you hear in this car anymore is turbo squeal, because it really do just be start from the beginning here.
I don't think we can hear that.
And you can watch, it's always funny with the downturned exhaust pipe, you can see the smoke spraying off the bottom.
Oof.
And I must say I love the sound of the lift there. I don't know how much you can hear that, but the almost the blow off, so to speak, when it comes out of boost here.
I can't hear it, but do
Ah,
you want to?
drats.
You might want to share the audio.
Oh yes, silly me. Again, bear with us, folks. We're
Yeah,
beginning. I'm learning the tech here.
we're still learning the tech here. We now know what it feels like to be a college professor. All the struggles they deal with, all the times the professor says, "Oh, can you hear this YouTube video?" No, no, we can't. Thank you.
But yeah, what I
Um,
was speaking of earlier there, it's really that lift is what I love here, and you can hear kind of the drop and in spool as it runs out of boost there, which I always like with this car. Gotta love it in the winter
Oh
where it's
yeah.
just,
Okay.
just spit and smoke.
That
And
is
yeah, this
nice.
is this is after I've even recorded, the violence of the start, where it for the first 10 seconds before I thought to pull out my phone to video it, it was doing the full chug, 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 and just puffing smoke and trying to get itself going this morning.
I, I
So
I just realized I had a bit of a brain fart. As it turns out, I think since we're listening to each other through Zencaster, uh, we can't hear what the stream is hearing. So uh, I don't know. It probably it may come out. It may actually the sound may come out. So there you go.
so are you not being able to pick up the sound of the video then there?
Well, no, I'm not listening to the video audio. I'm actually listening to the Zencaster audio.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying here.
Sorry there, folks. We're having a bit of a moment there.
Yes, this is the life of again adjusting to all the newfangled tech here.
All the newfangled tech. Yeah. But you know what? That I'm gonna say that I've actually heard that thing outside in the wintertime before.
That is true.
It does sound very nice. It does sound impressive. All the chugga chugga chugga, so to speak. But it's a nice vehicle there, Ben. I'm glad to see you got it back up and running. It's probably not as good as the Corolla you were driving. Um,
No, it was not. Yeah, we'll be going into that a little bit later in the episode, but I've also got a nice review this week for the old Toyota Corolla I was driving. For those who listened last week, you'll know I was discussing that for a while I had a rental vehicle through insurance, and I was driving around a 2019 was Corolla. Um, so I've got some spec stuff, and look out for. I'll be doing a full review as well in written form, probably sometime next month, or I guess this month now. But look out for that later. I'll post some links through our various social channels and things like that. But yeah, we'll be talking as well today a little bit about my kind of closing thoughts with that car. I had it for just over 2 weeks, so I put about 3,000 or so kilometers on, a pretty fair amount, maybe 2,000. So I got pretty good kind of seat time with it and getting to know it. I use it in my day to day life, etc., etc. But yeah, honestly, it's just nice to have a manual back more than anything. Um, it once again cements my idea I've been talking about, as again last week we discussed our next possible vehicle purchases, and I kind of had stressed I'm looking mostly at manual cars, and this just reaffirmed it again. Forgot how much fun it was using all three pedals. Um, Even though obviously it's a 97 horsepower diesel, it's not the fastest, most fun car. It's a station wagon after all. But I really do just enjoy driving the thing. Hate it in the winter because it takes a decade to heat up. But other than that, it makes for these cool videos I can post up. So yeah, look for those posts and videos and things like that. We'll continue to also plug through our channels. But yeah, overall, I've been enjoying getting the car back. The only real thing after the major kind of timing issue, and I can't actually remember now. If did I go over my timing belt kind of conundrum and engine mount snappage and all that on the last podcast? I want to say I might have, but I can't remember.
I too want to say you might have, but do you want to just do a quick run through just in case?
Yeah, I guess just for those who either missed it, or if I am having a brain fart here and I didn't actually mention it last week.
Welcome
Yeah,
to
for
finals
those.
week.
Yeah, my brain is on 5,000 subjects at once here.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so what happened essentially, when I was driving my jet around after an accident I had with my Mazda Speed 3, um, the one of the two of the bolts that hold the passenger side engine mount in place. For those who don't know Mark IVs, the mount kind of bolts to a bracketing system that then bolts to the engine. So obviously the whole frame engine combination of everything. The brackets for the engine side that the mount's supposed to bolt to, the bolts that hold the bracket in just decided to snap off inside the engine block. So engine mount slipped, motor slipped, mount punched a hole through my timing cover, chewed through my timing belts, destroyed my tensioner, and a few other things. And after we put the car back together, thank God, the timing belt was still intact enough that it had held the engine's timing, so we didn't have to reset timing. It didn't jump, it didn't slip any teeth, it didn't damage the valves, the retainers, anything like that. So the car's engine is mechanically fine. I actually just did an oil change this weekend for this exact reason. I was a little stressed out when I did it. We did the full. We were at my buddy's. Actually, we were at a Chevy dealership. I won't say the name since technically it's a little gray zone that I was working in there. But thank you to great friends within the Canadian area that allow me to do some solids. So we had one of those magnets that you can use in garages, usually for grabbing bolts or something like that, but we were running it all beside the oil as it drained out of the car, so we could
Mhm.
try and see essentially, crap, is there any metal flakes that are going to get dragged out of this oil? Because I was still scared that even when the mount dropped, it might have like just hit the timing chain gears or something and damaged the teeth somehow. I was just so worried because there's so many metal shavings around my engine bay from the tensioner being sheared through, that I was worried that maybe that metal is from somewhere else in the car that was much more internal to the engine, and could be a problem. But seemingly so far, we puked the oil out. There was no metal in the filter. There was no metal in the retained oil that I dropped out of the pan. So seems like, knock on some cheap IKEA furniture here, the that nothing went wrong with it. So hopefully I won't have to worry about anything with that car. It's kind of off and on headaches, so I really just want to have to. My ideal situation is to just try to think about it as little as I have to this winter. Um, but a cool thing for the channel, as far as some content that we'll be having probably in the coming weeks, one of the downsides, but upsides for you guys listening, of my car losing this mount is when the mount dropped down. What we didn't find out until we put everything back together is it actually punched a hole through my flex pipe too. So my
Oof.
downpipe now has a hole in the side of it somewhere. Not quite sure exactly where, somewhere on the bottom half of it, but either way, it punched enough of a hole through that I've got this weird exhaust tone now, because there's clearly a leak and it's causing an off vibration at the front of the engine now.
Mhm.
So eventually, my plan is now to switch finally to for. I also guess I wouldn't have mentioned it before in a podcast. I've been sitting on a catlet on a aftermarket downpipe or whatever for my car, um, like a high performance cat and all this stuff. But
Right.
yeah, I'm going to be tossing that guy on there. Go up to a 3-inch size too, so a bit better back pressure. This is finally my justified excuse to put an aftermarket exhaust on my car that I've had for over a year. And I've just been waiting till the car works before I wanted to do anything like that. But at this point, I feel like I can kind of justify it. I need it. Like, there is a leak. It's creating an engine light issue now and stuff too. So I'm gonna have one of my friends. Hopefully, I think my friend Ryan, if he ends up doing the work, I'll plug his fab shop in here just because why not? He does do good work. He's done a few of my friends' exhausts, so I think he's going to do mine. I'm in talks with him right now between some of his welding projects to try and mock something up for me behind the downpipe, since that's all I've got right now. And I'll probably do a full 3-inch turbo back, I think. I'm not going to do any mufflers or resonators. For those who own
Mhm.
diesels, diesels just don't get loud. There's not really a need for mufflers on them. They don't get drony and boomy on highways the way that the gas engines do. So I don't really have to worry about that. And then I'm still going to try to do my plan is to do either a single or shotgun tips that point down again, just like the factory system. Because as you guys just saw in that video, I think it's really cool when the exhaust like bounces off the ground and kind of shoots to the sides.
Yeah.
And it's also a little bit courteous with diesels because it does mitigate a bit of the smoke that goes straight at the car behind you when you downturn. The same reason diesel trucks have the exhaust offset to the right. It's so when you hit the throttle, you won't just pour smoke all over the poor sap behind you.
Yeah.
Like tipping it down, at least when it hits the ground, it'll dissipate the smoke out a little bit more, so you're not just dropping it straight at the car behind you. That being said, people still change lanes when I fly behind them,
Yeah.
but even with the stock exhaust, so we'll see how once I get the downpipe on, if the car smokes anymore or not. I don't know, but stay tuned, I guess, for that one. I'm pretty excited for that. Yeah, I guess that's kind of been most of my daily updates. I also figured I'd mention too. I don't know if you're also interested in this, Jeremy, but I thought since we have connections to a few different cars with our families and things like that, some other vehicles we drive, we
Mhm.
would just keep people updated as the show and podcast goes on about just some reliability facts about vehicles, kind of upcoming work cars maybe have had done, just for anyone maybe curious about buying something that we have experience in or whatever.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to mention that I brought my mom's Mazda 3 into the shop last week for some maintenance, just some quick updates and some checks on things. She drives a 2012 Mazda 3 hatchback. It's a Skyactiv, so the newer Mazda engines, the 2-liter. They did not have the 2.5 at that time yet available. So with the 6-speed automatic. So yeah, the car just went in for a couple sounds to get checked out. And I just thought I'd talk about it quickly as another good testament to the reliability of
Mhm.
Mazdas in general. I think Jeremy is kind of in agreement with me on this, especially in more recent years, that Mazda's becoming more and more one of the top actually recommended companies as far as reliability goes.
Yeah, yeah. For sure.
Yeah, the Skyactiv engines particularly have been showing really good history. Same with the 6-speed torque locking torque converter automatic, whatever fancy automatics they use now with those in conjunction with those Atkinson cycle motors. And yeah, she's had pretty good luck with it so far. Like I said, it's a 12. She's owned it since brand new. Bought it actually in January of that year. And or possibly December of 11. I can't remember exactly, but right around that, beginning of 2012, essentially. And it's got just over 160,000 now kilometers. And it's been pretty good overall. She hasn't really had to do anything too major. It's really just been a couple. It's now on its second brake job. Just had its second set of rear brakes replaced. It's still on so it's on its third set of rear brakes, I guess, and it's now on its second set of fronts. But besides that, it's been serpentine belt, alternator tensioner, and I think that's it. Actually, I'm trying to remember. Oh, ball joint and wheel bearing. So really, it's been. She just finally had to do last a couple weeks ago lower control arms. So the cars, and all this stuff's been the last about a year and a half. So the cars finally, getting to that 8-9 year point where you don't do any work to a vehicle and you start having to do those, kind of
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
smaller fixes. But it hasn't been anything too major yet. So I think the car's still got plenty of life left in it. It's been throwing an engine light recently. Just finally discovered. I think it's the downstream O2 sensor, so it'll
Hmm.
need an O2 sensor soon. But yeah, I just wanted to give that quick brief update as just a testament to Mazda reliability. The blower motor's been making a weird noise, but and same with the alternator tensioner. For some reason, the tensioner, the new one's been making a ticking sound, but it's fine. The tensioner itself is working okay, so I don't know why it's doing that. And then the blower motor is also making a bit of noise, especially when it gets colder outside. But motor still works fine, so we'll see if we end up replacing it. You have to kind of pull the dash for it, so we're debating right now whether or not it's worth the money to do it or wait until it gets worse and actually the part itself wears out.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, just I thought I'd give that quick little update on that car, and it also kind of came in conjunction with a news story I saw this week that I thought was interesting. Consumer Reports every year does a list of top most reliable car companies, and for the first time, I don't know if ever, but at least in the last couple of years, I've been following the list. First place this year was not Toyota; they were dethroned by Mazda as the most
Really?
reliable car maker. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, for
Good to
the
hear that.
first time, I think the last couple of years I've been following. At least Toyota's always been near the top, and Mazda hadn't broken top 10 for a while, actually. Now, if I remember correctly, with Consumer Reports average, I think they only look at cars from the last like 15 years or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So I'm thinking what probably happened, if I understand their system correctly, is that when they average, I'm not sure if they average a new car brand though, or if they average lifetime. But I know when they
Hmm.
keep lifetime data, it's only about 15 years. So the proteges would have all just started falling off that average list. So I'm not sure if that's why they finally jumped so high, or if it
Right.
is a new car test thing. And the main reason that they didn't win or get high up last year was because the Mazda 3 was still new. The CX-9 I don't think had been completely sorted yet. Like the turbo engines hadn't been figured out all the way. Whereas now, the 3's been sorted a little bit more. Mazda hasn't released anything super new right now. So
Hmm.
it's just a good year for them in general. Toyota's had quite a few major redesigns this year. We've got that new Highlander,
Yep.
the new Venza, new
Sienna?
Sienna,
Yeah.
new Corolla Hybrid.
Yeah.
Um, Even the Corolla is still only, what, a year and a half old. I feel like that just came out. Uh,
Hmm.
and even the Camry, for that matter, is not super old. But I mean, I would consider that an average life. Like that,
Yeah.
it's into its life cycle now. But yeah, a couple of major developments and a lot of hybrid tech update stuff. I know all those new SUVs and vans I just mentioned are all hybrid tech vehicles. So I don't know if because it's so much new stuff, that's why they're having issues or what caused them to jump down to. Now keep in mind they're still, I think, second or third place, so it's not like they're a bad company. But yeah, I just quick plug to Mazda. I'm a little bit of a, again, it's a background episode about us. I'm a bit of a shameless Mazda fan. So I'm glad to see it. It's ironic because, as I've said many times to people, I don't really like new Mazdas that much because they don't make anything manual turbo performance
Hmm.
anymore like my old Speed. But I'm glad, as I said to some friends when I posted about the Consumer Reports news, I'm glad to see that even though Mazda's not making cars I really want anymore, they're at least making cars that are probably the best I can recommend to like normal people that are looking for vehicles. Because
Hmm.
years ago, if anyone asked for a car, I probably would have always just told them, "Oh yeah, just buy a Corolla or buy a Civic." But
Right.
a
Yeah.
lot more times, I'm inclined to recommend Mazda 3s now. Still not the most spacious vehicle, but can't
No,
beat them for reliability.
but they're nice. I like them.
Yeah, they're really good cars. Some people aren't as big of a fan either of the newest ones, the fourth gens. I'm
Hmm.
a little bit more defensive of them than some. I've driven all the generations of them. Um, I've driven. handful of second gens, pretty good number of first gens, at least a dozen, and then probably realistically probably 50 third gens, but I don't really count it. It's enterprise, so they were all the same car essentially I was driving.
Yeah.
Some were the 2 liter, some were the 2.5, some were the hatch, some were the sedan. So I did actually get a little bit of experience with each of them, but they were all automatics. So the only manuals I've driven have been the I've driven a second gen regular manual, and I think yeah, I've driven a regular one and a speed one. First gen, I've driven the 2.3 with a manual. Don't think I've driven the 2 liter one with a manual, but I've driven the 2 liter with an auto, the 2.3 with an auto, the speed 3 with the manual, and I've driven a few other. So I've really gotten a little bit of seat time with all of them. The newest Mazda 3, I've actually only driven with the 6 speed manual and the front
Really?
wheel drive. I've not driven an all wheel one. I've not driven an auto one because my friend let me test drive the first. One of my friends is a works at the one of the local Mazda dealers here, and he let me test drive the first manual they got in. Because of course, when he was going through the key box and he said, "Do you want to try a manual or an automatic one?" I'm not going to say I want to try the automatic.
Yeah, right.
I'm happy they still sell them in stick to begin with because I know for a fact they don't sell really any of them at this point, sadly.
Mm. Mhm.
But yeah, just a nice little plug for Mazda there. I thought I'd throw into our episode. Speaking of kind of plugging brands we love, I think Jeremy, you wanted to talk a little bit today about the old Mustang Mach E.
Oh boy. Well, this seems to be a bit of a controversial topic amongst just Mustang fans in general, or even muscle car fans, because they slapped a Mustang badge on both a CUV slash SUV, and it's electric. Two things that don't sort of go with the Mustang brand. And Ford's really leaning into it because they really want brand recognition with this new electric SUV slash CUV. What would you say? Was it more of a CUV or?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it is unibody. It's low slung, so I would call it more of a CUV than anything. Yeah, it's very much that rolling architecture that everyone does now.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I was a little bit disappointed at first when I heard that it was going to be a CUV and that it was also going to be electric. And then when I saw the designs for it, it took me a while to really embrace the design because it really took me to go to the actual auto show press day and look at the car up close, and I started to fall in love with some of the lines that they went with. But anyhow, we're skirting from the topic at hand. So today, Ford released or announced the Mustang Mach-E GT Performance, and they released the stats today. Um, and they're impressive. They're not bad. They're actually quite impressive. 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. It's got a top speed of 400. Sorry, pardon me. It's got 460 horsepower, not a top speed of 460. That would be crazy. 235 miles of range. That's impressive. Um, Ben, you must have it up as well. Uh, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually growing on this car a little bit. I was definitely one of those people that was a little bit of an internet hater when they first said the
Hmm.
name. And I get it. You and me have discussed it. It's a marketing thing,
Yeah.
as we've said. We understand it. I get why they do it. I always wonder with these experiments how many people you piss off versus how many people the name grabs the attention from. But at the end of the day, I think if anything, it works from a marketing perspective because it really does get a lot of that attention. I don't think this car would have garnered nearly as much "what the hell is this" if they didn't stuff Mustang logos everywhere on it and just put Ford logos on it. I don't think it would have been nearly as much of the same conversation,
Yeah.
personally.
No, I think you're right on that front. And there was just so much uproar with the name. Like I remember walking into that room with a bunch of journalists, and they were just taking photos. And a lot of journalists were saying the same thing. This is not a Mustang. They can't call this a Mustang. It doesn't look like one. And to a
Yeah, you
certain
and me we were at the auto show together there on that press day, as you said, and it was funny that you're totally right. Like you could audibly hear the journalists critiquing
yeah.
the name of the car. It was quite funny, really, to see in person.
Yeah, it was just so funny, and so I just sort of went in there with an open mind, really, because I didn't want to go in there thinking, yeah, this is not a Mustang. I gotta hate this because that's not the way you approach cars, especially new designs. And so I walked around it and I got a sense of what it was. And, pictures don't really do cars justice most of the time. You really should go up and look at them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had the same thoughts actually with the Mark V Supra was the same way. I actually was just speaking with my father last week about this. He'd seen one on the road and he hadn't seen one before in person, and he called me
Hmm.
to tell me about it. Where he's like, "I thought this car looked terrible in pictures, and now I saw one drive by me, and I thought it was the coolest looking thing." And I had the exact same thought when I saw them in press events, in photos. I thought it looked weird, but I didn't want to say anything until I saw it in person. Then I saw it
Right.
in person, and I still thought it looked weird, and I started critiquing it more, and I think I actually wrote at one point an article, kind of shitting on the car a little bit and why I didn't think it was a good business model. And lo and behold, I saw one at a car show, stock, and thought, oh, it doesn't look as bad out in sunlight. And then I saw one modified, and I'm like, oh, you know what? It really does take to modifications well, though. Just like a 240 or something, if you put enough aftermarket on it, it does start to look cool. And then I
Hmm.
saw one rolling, and seeing one going. There's something about the Supra, especially going down the road, that I find
Yeah.
really satisfying. There's a nice look to it when it's cruising. But yeah, I totally think that a lot of cars are that way, where seeing the Mach-E in person helped me a lot
Yeah.
grow to like the styling. And I'm excited to see when we actually see them in dealerships, on the road, driving around a little bit. I'm excited to see what I think of the look as it kind of continues to evolve, because I find my opinions always seem to grow on a lot of new designs. Um, I want to say it was maybe Doug DeMuro, but some guy that's larger in the auto industry, in the YouTuber, auto journalist, content creator, whatever
Hmm.
world. I'd seen recently said something about this too, where um, basically said in a nutshell, all cars when you first see a new design, you think looks weird. And it
Yeah.
tends to be the case. Sometimes it wins me over immediately. The Bronco, for example, I kind of liked instantaneously.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but a lot of cars, I do think I change my opinion of over time. So I'm excited to see how my kind of thoughts evolve on the Mach-E. As far as the specs though of the new one, it's pretty impressive though. Like the 0 to 60 times good. I think it's staying competitive within its
Tesla
segment.
range. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's doing the budget Tesla thing fairly well.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see when it finally does come out if it's a logical purchase choice over a Model Y now that that's out in the market.
Yep.
At the very least, I can already say right now, personally, with full confidence, I don't see how it's any uglier than the Model Y. So, at the very least, I would purchase it for styling reasons more than I would purchase
Hmm.
the Tesla. Now, everything else, we'll have to wait until we get the car to see kind of how the rest of the car is. But at the very least, I give it credit. I think it looks significantly better than probably, in my opinion, any Tesla in the market outside of the S, I think, right now. So,
Wow. Wow.
although I must admit, I'm not a huge fan of the Model Y. I think the Model Y is hideous. I think the Model 3 is also not the greatest looking. I think it's fine. I think the Y is actually straight up ugly. I think the Cybertruck is stupid. Personally, sorry.
I would have to agree with you on that one. Yeah, the Cybertruck's just fucking
Yeah.
stupid.
That truck especially, and you and me, I think we had this in some practice recordings, and we'll have to talk about it again when we get some more news on it down the
Oh,
road.
yeah.
But the Cybertruck is just one of those vehicles where I will believe it when I see it. I just want a DOT road legal version of this truck, and I'd like to see what that looks like. Because I don't trust the shape right now. I don't see how it's making it through crash test. There's a lot of reasons I don't like the Cybertruck, but the styling, personally, I think it looks stupid. I don't see a situation in which I will ever grow to like the Cybertruck. Maybe again when it's in person, it'll look kind of spacey.
Maybe, yeah.
I highly doubt it, because even cars like the Aztec, where people have flipped on it kind of over the years, I never grew. I always thought they were weird looking. I still do. So I doubt I will grow to like the Tesla styling. Really, to me, the Model S really is the only one that's truly elegant. I think the X, the gull wing doors are cool, but the rest of the car looks kind of awkward.
Hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I give the Mach-E credit for. I think it's probably one of the most significant electric vehicles outside of Tesla recently, save for maybe the. I will give credit to the Mach, or not the Mach-E, sorry, the Jaguar XE. I want to say it was called, or IE, maybe it is.
Mm-hmm.
iPace. That's the one I'm thinking
I-Pace.
of.
There we go. The I-Pace. Right.
I'm like, what the God, the Jaguar lettering messes with my
Isn't
brain.
there like an E-Pace as
Uh,
well too?
Yes, the E-Pace, which I always think in my head is the electric one because E for electric, but no, that's the midsize or compact one. The
Oh,
I-Pace, I for electric, because that makes total sense.
of course.
Uh, so yeah, I think that was a somewhat significant SUV as well, particularly because it handled so well and things like that. But yeah,
Hmm.
outside of that vehicle, Teslas, I think this Mach-E is probably one of the most significant, at least in the electric SUV market. Um, for sure in recent times, and I'm excited to see what kind of continues to develop from it.
Yeah, I mean, I love what they did with the I mean, I love the new color that they're showing off, this cyber orange. That is a strong looking color right there. I also love
Yes,
the
very cool color.
I love the faux grill too. I mean, never in my life would I think that, a fake grill would be cool. I mean, let alone fake air vents. Those aren't fully cool, but a fake grill on this car is actually pretty solid. It's pretty solid. I like it. They did a pretty good job with it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the car continues to grow on me, and I'm excited to see what happens with it as they kind of continue to continue to learn more about it and get closer to the release, I guess, of it.
I 1000% agree with you. Yeah.
As far as some other newer, I guess, vehicle stuff going on, I just wanted to mention it since we talked about it last week a little bit as well, briefly in our intro here. The Mercedes AMG GT, the Black Series that just set the
Yes.
Nürburgring record recently. And it was ironic. I'd had a conversation on that episode about how I was shocked a car that was so inexpensive and so low in the sports car level of the industry
Mhm.
set such a fast Nürburgring time. Because I was thinking, it beat GT2 RS, it beat Aventador SVJ, vehicles that are $300,000 to $500,000. Well, it turns out, I was looking at it today. Turns out the base price of the new Black Series is 325,000 US dollars, which I don't know what the actual base sticker is, but it's somewhere between I know 1 and 200,000 because I've seen them in the used market dipping under 100 now, a couple
Yeah.
years old. So it's got triple the original MSRP, which now
My god.
explains a lot of why it is so much faster
Yeah.
than the original. I mean, I guess it is still a good bargain in the sense that the cars it beat do still cost 100, 200, 300,000 more.
Oh, yeah.
But 325, not what I thought that car was costing. I was thinking maybe 250 at the most with the
Mm.
modifications. I did not realize the Black Division, or whatever they're called, that Gunther Works, Skunk Works department in AMG there managed to put 200,000 in parts into this car, but apparently
Yeah.
they did.
Wow. I mean, I'm not surprised though. Like, I'm not surprised. There's probably a lot of technology in that specific in the AMG Black, and I mean, to beat what was it, the SVJ? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
they really needed to step up their game.
Yeah, to beat an
Um,
SVJ, a GT2
yeah,
RS, it was not in low competition for sure.
no, yeah,
So I give them credit, even with the price. I think it's still a deal for the time it's set. It's just crazy to me the cost of that over regular AMG. However, it'll probably hold the value, at least in the case of I know the SLS AMGs, the blacks have been holding way more value than the regular SLS spec. So I can't imagine it's going to be any different of a case, especially Mercedes. Lately, I find has a tendency to produce pretty heavy the numbers of their lower trim level performance vehicles. So I don't think there's really going to be much of a used um, collector market, so to speak, with the
right.
AMG GT S's, the GT Ts or whatever they're called. The touring model, whatever that one's also called.
Mm.
They make like 3 or 4 specs of that car now, but the I think the R's and like the various limited editions are going to be in the blacks are going to be the ones that really hold any value. Especially this one setting the Nürburgring record, I imagine will probably give it some added long term value and collector value. And it does obviously look like the craziest, coolest, most turned up to 11 AMG car you can buy at the moment.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. Tie coming off.
So we're getting into the real meat of
Getting
the
into the
episode.
meat and potatoes of this podcast. Here we go.
Yeah,
All right.
exactly. Only other thing I kind of wanted to touch on this week. I know you, Jeremy, aren't as big of a follower of F1 as I am, but just some interesting discussion that's been coming out a lot in the auto industry this week. I wanted to briefly mention, kind of bridging into the new segment again here, is the Bahrain Grand Prix was last weekend, and for those who watched, there was a pretty big accident with Romain Grosjean involving the race there. It was quite the significant kind of collision. I will send a video actually over to Jeremy, just into our shared doc here, simply for technical reasons, in case he cannot see it from our end here when I start sharing the screen. But I just wanted to talk about it in regards to, for those unfamiliar, I don't know, are you familiar with the halo at all in Formula One, Jeremy? The design on the actual F1 cars?
I am familiar with that. Yes. Yes, I am.
Yeah, so for those unfamiliar with the Halo, it's essentially a kind of exoskeleton. Actually, I'll begin sharing my screen now so you can see it, but it's essentially an exoskeleton over the driver um, that is essentially designed here. Um, as you can kind of see in this imagery, it is designed to basically protect the head more than anything. It was
Yeah.
developed after James Bianchi, I believe is how you pronounce his name, or it might have been Jules Bianchi. Um, Close friend of Charles Leclerc, the car Ferrari driver. He was in an accident years ago, a horrific one in the Japan GP, where he essentially crashed underneath a. I don't know if you saw Jeremy at any point, but he crashed actually underneath a excavator truck. So
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I heard about that one. No.
Yeah, so essentially what had happened is there was a car that had collided into the wall on track and it was being dragged off. So one of those big backhoe or construction trucks came out with the hook to pick it up and, run it off the course.
Mhm.
And when it went to do this, it was on track, obviously, and Bianchi in the same spot that driver spun out. He spun out and lost control and went off course. But now there was a giant truck there, so basically the F1 car slid underneath the back of the construction truck,
Oh,
and then the truck just
no.
dropped right back down on the car. So he unfortunately passed and succumbed to severe head trauma.
Yeah.
Um, so that's essentially why the Halo was created. And this recent accident at Bahrain with Romain Grosjean from Haas F1 this weekend is another great lesson to why the what do you call it? Why the Halo is such an important thing in F1 and why it's so good that this technology exists. A lot of drivers were actually quite resistant to adding it at first. It does look ugly. They've
Yes,
all
it
said that.
does,
I
yeah.
do agree. It's not a good look to the F1 cars. The old ones do
No.
have a more classical look. I think Mercedes probably has integrated it the best into their chassis, stylistically speaking, but I don't think it looks good in any of the cars. And it's a thing too with anyone that watches an F1 car, and you can see, I guess, on the shared video now, it kind of goes like straight down your line of sight. There's like a main pillar that goes
Oh,
between
yeah.
your eyes, so you kind of have to look around it as you drive, which is a pain too. But as you'll see in this video, why these halos are so useful. We'll play through a little bit of the clip here. You can see just goes
Boom.
straight, and you can see from the outer clips on the right or left side here from the computer perspective, and the fire that comes from this accident too.
Yeah. Huge fire. And the car basically splits in half. There was actually global news coverage of this crash. That's actually how I found out about it first. They were playing this on the 6 o'clock news, and I actually caught it when they were talking about it. It was actually a big story, and I think he came out with minor burns.
Yeah, basically, I saw him post on Instagram today. It looked like he just had some. It looks like he might have had some either. I don't know if it's full grafting or just that kind of heat resistance, but it looks like he might have had some mild skin grafting they've done to his fingers, or at
Right.
the very least, like burn protective stuff because he does have that protective material on his hand. But yeah, as you said, it's really just minor burns to the hand. He didn't break a single bone, which I don't understand. I mean,
Yeah.
look at this image I'm sharing right now of what's left. Folks who are seeing this video version of our podcast here, I urge you to check out this video if you're listening to the audio file. You can see here from the outer clip the back half of Grosjean's F1 car is still sitting out on the track, and the front half hit the guardrail so hard it split the railing open and went through it with Grosjean inside the car. And again, proof that the halo saves lives. Where if that halo wasn't there, the guardrail would have just obviously smacked him directly in the head, and that would have been it. He was
Yep.
he was doing over 200 miles an hour into that wall.
Yeah.
So there would have been, or maybe it's 200 kilometers, but either enough momentum, it wouldn't have ended well, obviously. So obviously, everyone's super happy to see he was okay. A lot of drivers have been talking up the kind of device, the Halo itself, on F1. And as Jeremy said, I mean, it managed to make local news, which doesn't really happen. I find F1
Yeah. No.
is
Not
not
really. No.
really, especially here for anyone who lives here in North America. F1 just isn't the biggest sport here.
No.
So it's pretty significant that he walked away from this crash. F1's been getting a lot more of these major collisions, and they keep coming out with people unscathed. So it's a good testimony to just how good these cars are being constructed now and how strong they are in the event of a collision. And yeah, it's just amazing to see that Grosjean walked out of this so okay, particularly climbing over, as Jeremy mentioned, the mild burns on his hand. That's from when you watch over the videos, from him grabbing the guardrail to hop over, as you can see actually here in the video.
Yeah.
He climbs through the fire essentially, and they're putting him out as he jumps over. But they mentioned it and stuff on which I hadn't even thought about on the video, and I think you can even see it a little here in the video. His outer, I think his right hand grabs that outer black section of the guardrail there,
He does,
which
yeah.
I'd heard was like thousands of degrees hot, which is probably why, even though wearing the fireproof suit, went being engulfed in partially being engulfed in the flames for so long, plus grabbing that bar with his right hand as he climbs over. I think you can even see him shake it a little when he gets out. Um,
Yeah.
it must have been, I heard it was something like 3,000 degrees, that guardrail, when he grabbed it. So, um, I mean, great work from F1, great work for the medical guys. I just wanted to give that a brief discussion, just some credit for how impressive I think that whole situation was and how well handled it was.
So well handled. Wow.
Yeah, just nice to see such positive results. F1 in general has been doing really well this year, given all the issues the sports had to face between COVID and changes with the industry and stuff. The drivers being frequently tested, they get tested like 3 to 6 times a week between all the traveling they do. So if people do catch COVID, it's at least contained every time. Hamilton, actually, they just announced today, tested positive, so he's not going to be racing this weekend. Possibly he won't even be healthy enough to race next weekend, or he won't be, cleared, which would really suck because that is the final race of the season.
Mm.
And he's been breaking some records right now. I know Hamilton would be crushed if he can't compete in the next two ending races. Also brings up an interesting question too of who's going to race this weekend. I know Stoffel Van Dorn is one of the reserve drivers for Mercedes. I can't remember the other official one off the top of my head. But Nico Hulkenberg's been doing a lot of work for Racing Point this year. Perez tested positive for COVID, so he filled in for him for a couple races. Stroll couldn't make it to a race once due to, I think, an injury, so he filled in for him as well. So yeah, he's got a few points on the board already with Racing Point. So there's discussion of whether or not Mercedes may try and just bring him in. He's been performing well so far when he's guested into the industry. But as someone personally that follows F1 kind of closely, I'm excited to see who they bring in there. And hopefully Roman can make it. I imagine he's not going to be able to race this weekend. I haven't heard, but hopefully he at least can race in the finale for Formula One this year and kind of in that closing race.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
From
All
there, I guess
right.
we'll go into some of our industry news here.
Yep. And I guess we start off with the Volkswagen news. They're dropping out of racing. They're not doing racing anymore.
No, that's correct. They're dropping completely out of the racing league or whatever, so to speak. Now, to stress to people, this article's from Jalopnik here. I've chosen to pull, but particularly they do. Well, Volkswagen has stressed this is Volkswagen pulling out of races, not VAG, Volkswagen Automotive Group. Specifically, this is a Volkswagen related thing.
Yeah.
So Audi just recently announced they're re-entering Le Mans. I believe they're going back to the Dakar Rally as well, which I'm really excited for. Porsche obviously still has their involvements in Le Mans, things like that. So realistically, it's not like VAG is gone, but Volkswagen as a brand is leaving racing, which I thought was kind of sad. There's, as seen here in the article, the IDR, which was getting a little bit of news for a while. They obviously have like the Polo and GTI spec rally cars that I've seen in especially Rallycross quite a bit. I don't know if it also this now removes kind of like the racing partnerships they had, but like Tanner
Mm.
Faust, who used to have the Rockstar Energy, Volkswagen Passat, he has a whole part. I know Faust has a whole partnership deal with VW. He drives a bunch of Volkswagen products and kind of promotes their performance and racing divisions. So I'm not sure exactly what that means as well for people like him.
Mm.
Um, so I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing to see. This article mentions it too. They've been pulling out of racing to a certain degree ever since the Dieselgate scandal in 2015, where essentially Volkswagen's been pulling back on almost everything in their departments since that whole event occurred, mostly due to financial strain, but also reposition the company to a more electric future, things like that. But yeah, I don't know about you, Jeremy, but I'm just a little bit sad to see this happen. I thought they had some interesting involvements in the racing division. Obviously, not the most significant company, but
Well, yeah, no, I was actually genuinely surprised to hear that they were pulling out. I mean, of course, as you mentioned before, Tanner Faust had a fairly strong connection with Volkswagen. I really remember his Volkswagen Beetle. That was one of the most
Mhm.
prominent vehicles I remember. I remember thinking that thing is so damn cool.
Yeah, I can't remember all the content I've seen it featured on that wasn't actually performing in sports and stuff, but I think he won a rally championship or two with that Beetle, and I know it was featured in a bunch of videos and things like that. He won, I know, a Formula Drift season as well a few years, close to a decade ago now. It's been quite a while, but I don't believe he was tied with Volkswagen yet at that point. I think it was more so when he entered his rally career, but yeah, the Beetle was really significant. I feel like his Passat got a lot of infamy too for just how crazy the LS7 setup was on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, definitely a shame to see. I think this all happened to Volkswagen. I was kind of hoping to see them stay involved. I mean, I know it's not the main thing that company's going for anymore. They seem less and less interested in performance and seem to pivot that more and more to other, pieces of their brand, Audi, Porsche, things like that.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean I'm not kind of, still sad to see the thing go.
Yeah, it's definitely sad to see this departure, or at least this chapter of Volkswagen go. I mean, I totally understand why they're doing it, especially with the Dieselgate thing that they had a long time ago. They're probably trying to save as much money as they can, especially in that Volkswagen department, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely, I imagine, more than anything, just our pivoting of finances. I know racing departments are
Yeah,
never the biggest money makers.
no,
And as it's this year, there was, Volkswagen Motorsport employed 169 people, which in the grand scheme is not that many. Um,
no.
I imagine most of their pit crews are bigger than that in Le Mans and things like that.
Oh yeah,
So I know they're not the most active in racing, so it's not like this. You could have never seen it coming, but it does still make it a shame to me,
yeah.
particularly their involvement with the basic bolt-on rally cars in the Golf GTI performance specs and things like that. That
Hmm.
I used to enjoy seeing in rally and in video games like Grid and Dirt and games that I like to play in my spare time. I guess we're not going to be seeing those cars anymore, or if we are,
No,
they're going to be the older models. We're not going to see a Mark 8 rally version. Like that's just not going to be a thing anymore. So it's a bit of a shame to hear, in my opinion.
yeah, real shame. All right. Well, I guess we should talk about the performance car. Oh God, you said the performance car of the year over the years. And basically, why don't you go ahead and talk about it?
Yeah, so Road and Track just did their annual Performance Car of the Year testing, which they've done every year. And I thought it would just be interesting before we went into our kind of bigger topics to just quickly go over some of the cars that have won over the last couple of years. I thought it was kind of a cool little maybe history thing to quickly brush through. So I guess they started doing it in 2013 here, where you can see the Corvette Stingray was the winner. Um,
Yep.
Interesting to see because if I remember correctly, and I could be misremembering this, but I'm almost positive remembering this correctly, a journalistic outlet, it might not be Road and Track, but I'm almost certain it was Road and Track, had a Stingray as a long-term vehicle in their test fleet. It might have actually been because it won car of the year for all I know, or performance car of the year. I don't know if they're like Motor Trend where once a vehicle wins, they try and recruit one into their long-term fleet. Motor Trend doesn't usually do it with the exotics that win, but maybe Road and Track did because the Stingray was affordable. I don't know, but either way, someone had one of these in a long-term test fleet. I believe it was Road and Track, and the real irony of this, it blew two or three transmissions, four rear ends, and two engines while it was
Oh
in
my God.
a year of ownership. This was back before the GM had really sorted out the issues with the new LT series motors, and they're still frying piston rings, and the Corvette had just come out, and GM hadn't really solved the new issues with all the tech the C7 had. To my understanding, they seem to be far more reliable in their later years. Still not perfect, but not nearly as
Mm.
bad as this era of C7 tends to be.
Hmm.
Um, so I must say it's nice to see it did get a win, I guess, back in the day.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
find
Throw it a
Motor Trend,
bone.
yeah, Motor Trend especially, it was pretty harsh on this car, mostly because they always seem to have reliability issues with the models. But yeah, it's nice to see it got a win back in 2013. I think it was one of the best cars back then. 2015 GT3. I don't even feel like there's much that needs to be added here.
No, not at all.
GT3s are GT3s. They are the best driver, considered the best driver's car by
Oh
everybody,
yeah,
really. So
by far.
um, it is impressive, though, as it mentions here, it beat out greats such as the 458 Speciale, Camaro Z28, and Viper ACR, which is interesting. That is a
Very
pretty
interesting.
strong list. That's some good competition there.
Yeah, yeah, that's like the perfect short list of great drivers cars. Excuse me, great drivers cars of that year.
Yeah, really, all that's missing is more recent additions like GT350s and things like that. But you've
Yeah,
got like kind of the collection right there.
there you
I
go.
mean, arguably, Chevy doesn't even make a car that handles the way the Z28 did anymore. They make the
No.
ZR1s, but they're more of a muscle car horsepower beast than anything.
Hmm.
Speaking of the GT350 series, 2016, we've got the GT350R taking the winner. Not
Yes.
surprised to beat out the Z06. Impressive it beat out the GTB. That is considered a good car, but it doesn't surprise me that much. The Shelbys are so well revered by
Oh
the
yeah.
journalistic industry, and I mean, I'd love to own one personally. That's for sure. I love that Voodoo engine.
Love that car so much.
2017, we had the Acura NSX as the winner. Now, I'm not sure if 17 would have been this would have been still the first iteration of the NSX, which is
Hmm.
interesting that it beat out both the Evora and the Grand Sport. Because actually, I found that a lot of journalists critiqued the first gen NSX pretty heavily. I've heard that they fixed a lot of the steering feedback and suspension feedback issues with some tuning and stuff like that, and some software and some also hardware changes on the 2020 or 2021, whatever the facelifted models are. But I'm actually quite surprised, honestly, to see this one up here in first place.
Hmm. Very
I'm not
surprised as
sure.
well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've heard from the same guys, Jeremy, but in my experience, I feel like generally speaking, the journalistic average for that car seems to kind of be dead center because I found a lot of people either
Yeah.
loved it or a lot of people really hated it. And there seemed to be, like I know Matt Farah loved it, Rob Ferretti hated it. Like it seems to be that there's no in between on that car.
Yeah. There's no real
So
in between. No.
yeah, the newer ones I've not really heard nearly as much negative stuff on. Motor Trend was super negative on this car. If I still have the car if I still had it on hand, I would love to dig up the old car of the year. But I swear they gave this thing like near last place, so it's hilarious to me that
Wow.
it won for road and track, but interesting nonetheless. McLaren 720S also an understandable winner,
Oh yeah. This
particularly
doesn't
for
surprise me.
its yeah, for its performance perspective, kind of capabilities. I guess impressive it beat out a GT3 more than anything, and the Urcon Performante was that year, which is also a really significant car.
Yeah.
The Performante, I believe, won Motor Trend's Car of the Year in 18. Um, so, or it might have been 19, but I know the Performante did win one previous year. So that's interesting that the 720 managed to beat it out. I know it performs better from a speed perspective, especially in the straight line, but
Hmm.
I'm surprised from a handling. Usually, people tend to find McLarens a bit disconnected, unless they're the 570s. That's the only one people seem to enjoy a bit more. So I'm a bit surprised that this one beat out the Performante.
Hmm. Yeah.
Still a good car though.
I'd agree though. Yeah, I'd agree with you.
01 2019 car of the year. Beat out McLaren Senna, which is impressive. They even got one of those to test, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
I know. Wow.
I guess there was that one press Senna that managed to make it through Motor Trend and places like that too. So probably all the same car. ZR1 took the win, which is interesting. I guess I'm not too surprised to beat
Really
Senna again,
interesting.
kind of
I'm.
disconnected. Um, I feel like there would be something that would have beat it out though. Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know if you're in agreement, Jimmy. I'm kind of curious. I'm gonna pull up the performance car of the year now and do some on the fly researches. And I'm curious as to what else it competed against. It must have been a weak year, you would think. Here
Hmm.
we go. No, we had a GT2 RS Porsche right here. I can't believe it didn't. That didn't beat it, if anything.
Wow.
Well, good for it, I guess.
Yeah.
And they
Holy
have the new
crap.
Pista. Yeah, I'm surprised of all vehicles it actually beat out a lot of them to come out on top.
Holy
So that's kind of interesting.
crap. Wow.
2020 car, their driver's car was the Veloster N. I remember this one very well because it pissed off a lot of people that are anti-Hyundai fans. I don't know if you followed this at all when it was announced, Jeremy. I can't remember if we discussed this when this was first announced last year, but I thought it was pretty crazy that it beat the new 911, which I think might have won Motor Trends if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, it beat out the mid-engine Corvette, which won Motor Trend's Car of the Year.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've heard positive things from every journalist that's driven the Veloster N. A lot of people seem to, call it the colloquial new Fiesta ST. That seems to be kind of the
Uh,
shorthand for it. It's that new, fun, small, tossable car that makes
yeah.
them dumb noises. I'm still not. I don't know. What do you think of the styling of these cars, Jeremy?
You know what? I love that. I love the restyle that they did with the front end. I mean, the pre facelift wasn't really my favorite design, and then when they came out with this new design with the I think they completely redesigned the rear end, the front end, and most of the sides and
Yeah,
stuff like
very
that. I
different.
think they did a really good job with it. They tamed it.
Yeah.
They definitely tamed it a little more. And you know what? If it is as good as the Fiesta ST ever was, then yeah, I'd love to get my hands on one of those and maybe whip one around. Um, I love the
Yeah.
color, especially that they display in this as well. Like, wow, it makes me really,
Yeah.
really want one, or at least try it out. Yeah.
I'd love to have one in a color like this because I found a lot of the early ones too only came in that ugly pale blue that I was not personally a fan of, or
Hmm.
they came in white or black. So I like seeing a different color for this car. I think this orange is kind of cool. I completely agree with what you were saying too about. I didn't personally dislike the first gen styling much, but I do think that it looked very busy, and I don't think it was ever a pretty car. It was a car I could see why you would like, but I don't think it
Yes.
looked pretty. Whereas I
Yeah.
think this is much better styled overall in general and much more reserved, toned down. Hyundai in general, I actually think this was probably Hyundai's best era of styling,
Yes.
2015 to 20 roughly, or maybe
Yeah.
19 even you could argue.
Hmm.
Um, that few year window there where they're building kind of more mature upper styled cars. Now I think the Elantra looks really ridiculous. The Sonata looks like a fish. The Palisade has the weird, really tall headlights. I'm not a big fan of a lot of the newer styling directions Hyundai and Kia are both taking. Um,
I mean,
so
I mean, if we're talking about the Palisade here, I think it makes up for its ugly design with the technology that's in it.
yeah, to me, the biggest issue with the Palisade is simply that the Telluride exists, and I think it executes the styling so
Oh,
much better. I would go
yeah,
with that. I
you're
do
right.
give the Telluride credit. Besides styling, it's a very good car. Hyundai's in general aren't particularly bad vehicles besides styling. I just don't like whatever guy they recently hired to do their. I know they changed major styling guys a few years ago too. So
Yeah,
this
they
is the
did.
work of a
Yeah.
newer person. And yeah, I can't remember his name offhand, but I'm not as big as fan to say the least.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Uh, but yeah, cool to see the end take the win. I remember Matt Farah did a whole expose on this and explaining why he thought it deserved the win because so many people were surprised to see it beat out, the Corvette and the 911, especially people that don't understand that best driver's car doesn't necessarily just mean fastest.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Jeremy will be happy to see this, but the 2021 winner,
Woohoo!
the Mustang took another from 2016 to
Yes.
2021. So the GT 500 takes the win. Great year for lineup too. There's a few decent competition vehicles this year. I think it was pretty well deserved. I've heard some pretty crazy things about this new GT 500. That this car is pretty. That's a great photo there. Um,
Wow.
this car is pretty wild. I've heard. This Shelby, its handling is kind of like you would not expect it for what the car is,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. But great collection here. We've got the new Mini Cooper. We've got looks like a CLA AMG, a Bentley Continental, the Polestar 1, M8 competition, new Porsche Cayman. I guess that must be the GT4, maybe? Would it be?
Yes,
It doesn't
maybe.
look like it's got much of a handling kit on it, but I also
No, no, it's a Cayman
oh,
T. A
a
Cayman
lightweight
T.
take. Oh, interesting. So this is a lightweight variation of the Cayman. I didn't know they were even
Oh,
building this, to be honest. Huh.
wow.
Okay. Some on the fly
Okay.
reactions for you guys here because I don't think either me or Jeremy knew this was a thing until right now.
No, I like it.
So as do I actually. It's cool, interesting orange too.
Yeah.
But I guess that's cool. And more lightweight knowing Porsche, a lightweight version of a base Cayman means it's probably an extra $10,000 for them to take all the
Oh
features
yeah.
out of it because Porsche loves charging you money to remove things from their cars. Um, But yeah, pretty good lineup this year. I don't think there was a whole lot of competition for it for most of these. Even the Cayman, I think, just naturally being a base model, people don't like that base boxer engine. So I'm not too
Hmm.
surprised that that didn't beat it. I think the only real competition it maybe had here was the Polestar 1 has been reviewed pretty well. And the new F Type, I've heard fairly positive things. Actually, I could have, if anything, I think the most likely second I would have seen was maybe the Raptor, or not Raptor, sorry, my apologies, the T Rex winning. Simply because it's such
The
a
T
crazy new
Rex.
design,
Yeah.
700 horsepower, performance truck that maybe because it's such a ridiculous idea, they would have given it the win. Although I'm
Hmm.
very glad to see the Mustang take that first place.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm very happy to see that. I think it's well deserved, especially for that Mustang, to win because they really stepped up their game with the GT 500 or so. Is that the GT 500?
Yeah, the GT350 I already thought was cool enough, and I personally would still rather have one simply because it's a row your own and it redlines so high. I
Yeah.
love the sound of that motor, but
Yeah.
you cannot deny more than anything the physics of the GT500 for a car that is so
Hmm.
heavy and so new in tech, like a new, all new automatic, an all new engine. From what I've heard, this thing just glues itself to the road. You really cannot beat these things going around corners on tracks. They're a machine. They're a Terminator. They're stupidly fast. And it's funny coming from base Mustangs, where Mustangs aren't really that well reviewed as being the best handling or driving car. I know journalists are pretty quick to shit on the GT, especially. Um, as being kind of a fine performance car, but it's not. If you want a canyon carver, it's not the car to buy. That goes to the GT350, the GT350R, the GT500, and more of the track respect.
Yeah.
So it's just pretty cool to see what Ford can do with these cars. Ford in general has a very good knack at making a very bland car very good when they get the performance division gets their hands on it.
Oh yeah.
Um, Mustang's great example of that in the Shelby division. The Focus, I think the RS is a great example of that. I think the base Focus is garbage. I think the RS is really cool. I think a base Fiesta is absolute crap. I love the Fiesta ST. It's one of my favorite cars. If anyone listened last week, I'm considering buying one eventually. So it's cool to see that just again another great representation from Ford and the Shelby Performance Division. Um, I actually think I just saw one of these go up for sale at a dealer I know out in BC, and it's like 100. They were asking like 176,000 or
The
something for one of
markups
these
are
with
absolutely insane on these cars.
yeah, it's pretty wild, the demand and the price, and I don't think things like this are not helping it. It's setting lap records and stuff. For anyone that
Hmm.
owns one, congratulations, your value just keeps going. But anyone that's looking for the buyer's market, not the seller's market, it's a tricky car to get your hands on right now for a reasonable price. You're paying into GT3 territory, so you kind of have to ask yourself, you'll be faster, but what are you looking for more in a car when you're spending $200,000 on a Mustang? I think it's hard for a lot of people to stomach the idea of spending 100,000 on one.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you. Although being a diehard Mustang fan, I would actually be willing to fork over that much money.
Yeah, I could see. There's definitely certain use cases where I could see people doing it. This would be. I would still have to have a lot of disposable income, but this would be. This is probably the first time I've ever considered spending 100K on a Mustang. I wouldn't have done it for the old Super Snake myself, but I
Really?
definitely would happily do it for this car, or a GT350. That's still definitely where my heart is. But I'm both a fan of it and this new 500. I'm quite happy to see the results from it.
Very happy to see that. Very nice.
Well, that about does it for our main kind of news for this week. I guess, just rolling into our kind of personal opinion section here, I was just going to touch on, as I mentioned earlier today, the Toyota Corolla I've been driving. Some closing thoughts, my kind of nutshell review, so to speak. And for those folks who didn't see it or hear last week, I was, as mentioned earlier, driving around a 2019 Corolla rental. It was a hatchback model. Just pulling up my notes here, I kind of been taking some detailed, following the review and kind of some note taking I've been doing over time as I kind of had the car for a few weeks, just kind of jotting my thoughts down as I sort of went, just to make sure I didn't forget anything when I did my review, and thought I'd bring up some of the things I both liked and disliked about it here.
Hmm.
For anyone that's maybe interested in shopping for a new Corolla, for example. But yeah, so it was as I said before, it was a 2019 model. It was a base model. I actually was googling the specs to confirm, but I did in fact get a absolute bare bones Corolla. I had the lowest possible spec you could buy this car in. So the sedans start at about 18,000, about 18.5 or 18.9, I forget. The hatches start about $4,000 more. Um, and there's a little bit difference in features and equipment and stuff as well. So the base Corolla sedan has the 1.8 liter Toyota engine in it. It has key-based entry still, so an old school, stick the key in the ignition. It has no keyless entry. It has no radar cruise. It has, I think, basic Toyota safety sense. All of their cars do now. But that's kind of the biggest things you get when you step into the base hatchback. So the base hatch steps from the 1.8 to the 2 liter motor, so you get another extra 30 or so horsepower and some extra torque. You switch up from the base model, now comes with keyless entry, push start, so there's no physical key version for the hatchbacks. You still have the steel wheels, you still have no heated seats, you still have the base infotainment screen, so you're still getting a fairly bare bones car. But yeah, radar cruise, push start, keyless entry, automatic climate control, Bluetooth audio, backup camera. I thought, all things considered, that's a pretty decent list of features for the absolute lowest possible spec of a car you can get.
Yeah, no, I definitely have to agree with you on that. I mean, Toyota has done a very good job over the years of starting to integrate, what would be additional cost or additional features for cars into the base model cars, which is making them more appealing. And so I can definitely understand the appeal of the Toyota Corolla. There you go. That's what we're talking
Yeah, here's
about.
a little night picture I took of it. Love the factory headlights, by the way. First little point for a base model headlight, it's got HID xenon projectors, which for one thing, pretty nice for range. I drove this thing
Fantastic.
at night
Yeah.
quite a bit. Great nighttime visibility. Looks pretty cool too. Like this little photo I took where there's a bit of fog in the air at night. It creates kind of a cool light beam cutting thing. I like the look of the LED daytime running lights that kind of run through the kind of headlight assembly to the closer to the center of the Toyota logo there, and then kind of fin outward. It switches to a completely different housing design when you switch up to the I want to say it's SE model or higher, but the higher level Corollas, the performance ones and the luxury ones. But yeah, overall for a base model, I was pretty impressed with the car, all things considered. The thing that gave it away more than anything was the fact that it ran those steelies. That's kind of the dead giveaway, is
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
ugly 15-inch steel wheels. But outside of that, there wasn't too much showing that it was a low spec vehicle. This one came in this very interesting kind of darker, like aqua color. It looks almost black in these nighttime images, but the car was actually bluish green when you'd see it in person, which
Really?
was I thought, kind of interesting. Um, it was definitely not like what you would expect, I would think, when you look at the color in imagery. I think you would never think that this car is like a blue vehicle or a green vehicle. But yeah, when sunlight hit it, it would turn into a bit of an off turquoise shades,
Hmm.
which I always thought was kind of interesting with
That
it.
is pretty neat. Yeah.
It's one of those colors too you like never see on a car. It's funny actually. The Corolla hatch only comes in the base model in three different colors, and this is one of them. So I thought that was kind of funny, of all colors for it to offer. This was kind of the one they chose for a base model. Um, because obviously when you get really low, poorly specced out cars, you're not getting much in the way of options for anything.
Right. Right.
Yeah, the exterior color options I was just double checking here are a metallic, which is essentially silver, a white, smoked paprika, which is red basically, and it's called Galactic Aqua Mica is the color name.
That
So
is cool.
the imagery, it's definitely. I'll share the quick Toyota page I'm on here. The imagery here, it's definitely looking more blue in the isolated Toyota images here. Um, I think in
Yeah.
person it looks a lot less. The blue shines through a lot less, especially if there's no light hitting it. This is more. I would say this is what you would see midday with overcast. This is what the car would maybe look like if maybe not even overcast. It was pretty sunny, but the sun wasn't hitting it directly.
Hmm.
When sun hits it directly, it gets a lot more of a green to it. It's basically a black primer with I think a blue second coat and then like a green metallic finish on top of it. So it essentially kind of looks like there's green flake in blue paint when light hits it.
Very
So
neat.
it makes for a pretty cool color, I think, in person. And yeah, looking at even some of these interior pictures, it's still a decently large center screen. You still get a fair number of features. The car handled shockingly well. That was probably the thing I was most impressed with, if anything. Is that on center steering was really good, steering feedback was really good, suspension feedback was fairly good. The only thing is, I didn't think the steering was as communicative as I would like going into corners or with adjustments in the road. I didn't feel as much as I'd like, especially the point of braking traction. I didn't find that there was really anything in the way of like traction, particular like traction issues more than anything. Like when that would break and the car would go to kind of step out sideways, there wasn't really a whole lot I found in the way of feedback there. I really just couldn't tell when the car was about to give out completely. Um, Kind of some other, I guess, thoughts I'll go through here is kind of some of my other main notes. Some other issues I had with the car. I'm not a big fan of CVTs. I've never been a big CVT guy. To use Jeremy Buckley here, folks, for the podcast here. But yeah, I've never been the hugest CVT guy. I think it has a flaring. I think it still has the flaring issue. It's one of the better programmed CVTs, I think, of Econo boxes out there, but I still think it's a flawed transmission design. Toyota, interestingly, on a lot of their CVTs, uses for an aftermarket first gear, so it's technically not a full CVT, as it's got an individual first gear like a regular automatic, but then it switches to a fixed final drive for the rest of its gears. It's like a two-speed basically, but the second speed is variable ratio, obviously, being a CVT. I'm not too sure how the technology behind that works, but I personally think the transition is also super noticeable. The car does a bit of that thing where you hit the throttle initially and it'll rev up. It'll kind of skip a beat, and really light throttle when it's not even having to rev more than 2,000 RPM. I think it's pretty smooth. And at very heavy throttle, when it just locks itself in first gear, locks the torque converter and floors the car, it feels pretty smooth. It's that in between where you go to maybe half throttle because you accelerate slow at a light, then the car in front of you speeds up, so you hit the gas harder, but then he goes to slow down because some guy's pulling into Starbucks or whatever might be happening in front of you, and you lift. And it's that moment where you go from 15% throttle to 40% throttle to 0% throttle, which I find in a lot of cars is when you're going to notice the most issues with transmission and engine programming and throttle body closure management and things like that. And this Toyota was no different. It was definitely a culprit to that specific stress case, I guess, or stress test, showing the issue with the car. And it is unfortunate that it's so noticeable in that circumstance, because it would really it would buck you. You'd get that full kick as the car went from first into the final drive of the CVT, and you really could feel it. I wish they would maybe mitigate that a little better. It was 19, so it's a couple years old. It's an enterprise car. It was a rental. Enterprise vehicles tend to get pretty abused. I don't know if maybe there was some prehensive damage or wear, or if they all do that. I remembered feeling it though in some of the other earlier Corollas I got a chance to drive back in the day when I first was still working back at Enterprise. So I still think it's a flawed design, but it's it kind of is what it is in the way of emissions control and things like that. CVTs kind of just need to be widespread at this point because people just don't care about using them. It's more of an enthusiast issue,
Right.
and they get good economy. So I was just while you were away there, Jeremy, I was just speaking on the issues that are the poor transmission programming in the Corolla CVT, which
Hmm.
I was just saying there overall was programmed pretty well, but it's got a fixed first gear, and you could always, if you use the wrong throttle positioning, it would always kick you as it went into the final drive ratio for the CVT. So I thought that was kind of an issue that hopefully Toyota would tune out eventually, but I haven't at
Ah.
least yet seen that problem fixed.
Mhm.
Otherwise, very smooth drivetrain. I think the 2 liter helps a lot in that car. I think the 1.8 engine, especially paired to the CVT, it gets a lot of flair, and where the CVTs kind of rev really high and just basically sit at 4 or 5,000 RPM and scream to try to get up to speed. The 2 liters don't do that nearly as much, and they also just generally sound, I find, more happy when you do use more throttle.
Right.
I think it's definitely worth the extra money to get that little horsepower bump of the 2 liter. And I still was observing amazing fuel economy. I averaged 6.8 liters per hundred over my time driving the car. And that was predominantly, I would say, probably 70% city driving. So a very good number, very respectable. Um, some other kind of issues I guess I had with it. I don't like that, and I'll cut back to the image of it here because I believe it was on Toyota's. Yes, it is. You can kind of see here through Toyota the kind of larger center touchscreen here, and then down the shifter, it uses this piano black plastic trim. And I'll see if I can Google image myself a better interior of it. Uh, the Corolla interior. Let's hold on here. Bear with me while I grab ourselves a better image for it. But this piano black material, I am personally just not a big fan of. So this material right here, I am not at all a fan of. It's very reflective, so in sunlight, it bounces light really poorly, and kind of ends up blinding the driver at the wrong angle.
Hmm.
And it's also running all the way down the center console here, so it runs kind of all the way through the center. And I just worry. In the rental I was in, it had about 41,000 kilometers when I got it, and there was scratch marks and key marks all over that center console,
Ugh.
particularly near the cup holders where people had been dragging things, probably a purse or something, across the console. and you can clearly tell the way that the finish is designed. It's either going to delaminate and peel over time, or if it
Hmm.
doesn't do that, at the very least, it's going to have that scratching issue. So, for a durability perspective, especially a car like the Corolla, where they're not going to die anytime soon, short of an accident, I wish they'd done a different design choice than this.
Hmm.
Um, but otherwise, interior wise, the screen's UI is a little slow. People like Doug DeMuro and some other journalists have critiqued to it as UI for being a little behind the times, and I agree. I don't think it's perfect, but I do like the design overall. I think it's kind of cool the flowing dash lines and stuff, the floating dash design it does. Overall, the way the car's interior is styled, I think, is kind of neat. The center cluster screen of the fixed speedometer with kind of the offset digital screen to one side and stuff, I think is a decent design, especially for a base model's cluster layout as well. I don't know what. Do you have any thoughts about the interior design, Jeremy?
It's actually quite nice. Actually, I mean, looking at it from the pictures you've got up here, I don't mind it. I don't like the beige. Um, the beige is not wouldn't have
Yeah,
been my first choice. If you get it in
that's
all
definitely
black,
not. Yeah, this would have been closer to what my interior looked like. That's a bit higher trim than mine there, but yeah, these give you a bit better of an idea with the all black and gray finish, and that definitely helps. Even this silver, I don't mind nearly as much. I would still prefer, I think, just a simple black, but
yeah,
you can see with a lot of these too that they're the XSE with the fancier center cluster layouts
yeah,
and things like that. Mine had more of an old school. I don't know if we've got a base
old
layout
school
lying around.
analog.
Yeah, there's an analog one here, kind of hiding in the background.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but still had the updated screen and stuff in it. So it was still pretty usable. Really, the biggest downside for me is I didn't realize it was a 19 until I tried to use my phone in it and found out it didn't have Android Auto, which was a little
Oh
frustrating.
no,
Or Apple
yeah.
CarPlay. Speakers were pretty impressive. That was another thing I noticed. I gave it credit for. I'm a big audiophile, so I'm always happy when I can listen to my music and not feel like I'm dying on the inside due to the lack of audio quality. Um, the Yeah, as I said, the suspension feedback was pretty good overall. I did have some mild critiques of it, but I think it's actually still one of the best handling cars in the segment. I think this is probably up there with the Mazda 3 for handling. If anything, when the Mazda went to the torsion beam design on the newer hatchbacks, they used to be IRS, independent rear suspension. They went to a
Hmm.
torsion beam setup to
Mhm.
save some money on new ones. And ironically, the Corolla does a reverse flip here, where the Corolla sedans have torsion beam rear suspension, but the Corolla hatchback is using IRS rear suspension. And I think I might have mentioned that last week as well, but I personally can really notice the difference in Enterprise when I would drive the Corollas back to back, the hatch and sedan. I always thought the hatch felt noticeably more nimble,
Hmm.
better steering feedback, better, and I think better sporty tuning in general with the suspension. And just having the shorter wheelbase, I think, helps a little too, along with that suspension change. But overall, pretty good handling feedback. I really liked that I found out if you put enough speed into a corner, I was doing some handling tests on it, you could get the thing to three wheel. So you could get that back outer wheel to kind of lift on it if you were really carrying some speed into the corner. And if you lifted the throttle the right way and you hit the brake at the right time, if anything, the car tended to oversteer before it would understeer, which I always say there's no better symptom of how a front drive car is a great front driving car than it actually oversteering. Because it's very rare that you can manage to get a front wheel drive car to actually obviously oversteer without yanking a ear brake because you're not getting any power from the back.
Hmm.
So it's all in the weight transfer. Um, the only other really kind of like nitpicky thing, I guess I could say, the lane keep guidance system. Toyotas let you turn it on where it's either a warning or it's an actual active system where the car will grab the wheel and electronically recenter the car, which is probably part of why it's a little vague on center with the steering communication being the electric wrap. But my big problem with that lane keep assist is it was very aggressive. I found it would, if I just was happened to be slightly, off center left or off center right of a lane, because let's say there's a big semi beside me or there's a cyclist on some reason why I'd like to be on the corner of my lane marker.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
the car would freak out and it would try to grab the wheel and pull me back into the lane. And it had so much aggressive weighting to it that when I'd be going into the bend of a road on the highway, I'd actually stopped driving myself and I started letting the car guide the corners because I would try to turn at my personal choice of moment into the corner and the car would basically fight me on it and would try to like
Oh.
counter steal the wheel from me. And the assistance in some cars is light enough where if you just pull back yourself, the car kind of lets go and lets you do it. But this car is really aggressive where, and all the Toyotas I found do this, but the Corolla seemed to be one of the worst where the wheel is like extremely heavy and tense, so it takes a lot of forced to adjust to the computer's turning inputs. So I found I started getting to a point where I either turned the system off entirely or I would just let my hands off the wheel. Not like fully, but would basically be kind of cupping the wheel. So if the car ever needed me to drive, I immediately could take over. And I was watching the road, obviously,
Right.
but I was kind of just watching the car go into the corners essentially to make sure it was doing it correctly, as if I'm babysitting a Tesla. So cool from a technology perspective, but I think it definitely has some ironing out to be done.
Hmm. Yeah, because I
But
definitely
you can
love.
only,
I was about to say I just love kissing the apexes of any sharp turns, especially when you have like the twisties and stuff like that. You really love kissing the apex. You know.
yeah, exactly. It was really more bends and city roads and things like that it got the most confused. Highways, it was a little smoother, but yeah, if you ever had to do any weird lane adjustments or the classic Toronto traffic thing where a car's kind of in your lane but not totally in your lane, that would always freak the car out too.
Ah.
It's just a bit of a nervous safety system. I still think Toyota's active safety sense is actually one of the best systems out there. I don't think any cheap econo maker makes a great system right now. The Ford ones are also super flawed. The opposite direction, where they just are so they do so little, it almost feels like they're not even there. Whereas this one does too much, so you kind of need like an in between of the two of them, and just some better tuning, like Teslas and cars like that of the like. But definitely a good start from Toyota, and I'm glad to see that this active safety sense stuff is coming in base model Corollas, which is very cool. Particularly the radar cruise is more of a feature for comfort than anything, but things like the active braking assist, the rear cross traffic alert, that's good stuff for obviously reducing impacts, reducing collisions, injuries to people. So it's nice to see that stuff being equipped in base model vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Can't agree with you more.
Um, but yeah, I guess that was kind of my main. I guess I'll just briefly touch on the styling too, since the Corollas are such an interesting um, looking car. I think the hatchback styling is a bit busy personally,
Yeah.
particularly from the back hatch. If we cut back to the Corolla here and we just do a 2020 Corolla in general on our trusty Google image search, I find that particularly the rear hatchback models have a little bit of a kind of the sedan. If you look at the sedans, I think it's a pretty normal look. Like it's still pretty conventional Corolla.
Hmm.
Um, that's the more obviously the more aggressive front end.
I like that a lot.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do prefer this new front end design, especially the sedans. I find have a lot of different front grille assemblies and stuff. The
Yeah.
hatchbacks clearly all just kind of come with the same front end. It's just a matter of if you get it painted or,
Hmm.
with the chrome trim like this from an SE model, um, or this very cool looking lowered one here that I'm very much liking. Oh, it's a super straight
My
one that explains it.
goodness, I love that.
Yeah, I think they're quite pretty cars actually modified. It's unfortunate they don't come with any horsepower, but um, the back especially I think is a little bit busier than I'd like. I feel like there's a little bit of overstyling going on in the rear end. Particularly the center point of that Toyota logo in the middle meeting.
Hmm. It is a
I'm not
tiny bit busy on that. Like I can see where you're coming from with that. I mean, those two lines meeting up to like the curving lines meeting up to the badge.
Yeah, it's like the curve of of the line below the hatch glass, the curve of the Toyota Grill logo cutout. There's the kind of character line that goes between the two taillights. Then there's this like styling point from the taillights going down. Then there's the styling point from the rear bumper going up. Then there's the fact that the whole hatch in general is kind of a big rounded shape that goes outward further the closer you get to the middle of the
Yeah.
hatch design. So there's just quite a bit going on in the back.
Mhm.
In general, if I had to give any critique on the styling, I think the Corolla as a whole is a bit of a busy looking car. Even the front
Yeah.
end, especially the non-sedans with this mono Toyota logo piece and the lower front grille assembly. I don't think it's a bad looking car in any way. I actually
No.
really like them, but I don't think it's from a styling perspective. I don't know if I'd ever call this a beautiful car. The way that I would actually consider calling a Mazda 3 hatch a beautiful car.
Yeah, I
Not
mean,
sure if I'd say
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, looking at the Super Street one, especially, I don't know why I'm drawn to that. I guess it's because it's big and it's red. Um,
it's
one could say it does look a little bit like your old Speed. It has like, it just sort of it has that Mazda 3 Speed 3 feeling to it. Yeah. Cuz
it
yours
does
was
have that.
yeah.
Yeah, it does have that hot hatch kind of fun performance hatchback. I wish actually, if anything, they put that 300 horsepower Yaris engine in this car,
Yeah, that would be so smart.
or any really for that matter motor that like one of those old Toyota motors that used to be able to rev to 8 9,000. It's just a car that Toyota doesn't do the interesting
Mm.
stuff they used to do with their vehicles mechanically. I'm glad they make them look cool at least now. If you're one of those people that just slams an economy car, this is a great choice for you. Um, but yeah, if it had more interesting engine options, I would probably be more inclined to like it. But overall, I must say I was pretty pleased with it. Um, my kind of, I guess my recommendations or whatever, my closing thoughts for that car um, was more the fact that if anything, I would be more inclined to taking, I think, that car over a lot of economy cars in that segment, I would also be more inclined to recommending it to a lot of people. Um, I think there's a lot in that segment now, but if someone came to me and basically said, I'm looking for an economy car and I just need something that's going to work and I want to work for as long as it possibly can, or someone in 10 years asks me, I need a used economy car for my son, a 2020 era car in 2030, what do I buy? I'm going to probably be inclined to recommending Mazda 3s and Corollas because they're just the long-term reliable vehicles. Honda Civics with the naturally aspirated engines are also pretty good, but their CVTs tend to be a little bit more problematic. And
Mm.
I also think the Civic has become somewhat out of date. In 2017, I think it was a really great car, but 4 years in the auto industry is a long time. I think it's just kind of falling behind. There's a reason why last week we were talking about a new Civic. It is about time for that redesign.
Yeah.
So I think for reliable family cars in the kind of subcompact segment, it is one of the best out there. This and the Mazda 3 for durability. I'd probably still be more inclined to recommend a Kia Forte to people that are keeping a car short term. Anyone keeping within warranty, 5-year leases, things like that. Simply because Kia just offers such good value for money. And I think that the Forte in a lot of ways handles and drives equally as good. I have a lot of concerns about build quality and reliability long term. But again, if you're doing a short distance, short kilometers, 5-year leases, things like that, even 8 years of ownership, I don't personally think that too many Hyundais will struggle if you maintain them well, or Kias to get to 150, maybe even 200,000. It's at that point that I begin to question the durability of the car. But
Mm.
for that first 100,000K, I think all the worst you might expect is some build quality issues with rattling noises or creaking things, if anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, overall, was pretty positive on the car. I find every time I get in a rental long enough, it really allows me either truly decide to love or hate it. I used to really like Fusion hybrids, and when I had a long-term rental of one of those, I actually grew to dislike it more over time.
Really.
This car I grew to like more over time, so I was kind of pleased actually of all things. I even got so used to the CVT, I almost stopped hating my life when I would feel it buck shift into the final ratio, where I would watch it flare the revs up. I briefly forget how some cars don't make that horrible noise. Maybe if you just only drive CVTs, you'll forget how terrible they are.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're a car guy, it's seen as sacrilegious to even be sitting in one, let alone drive one.
Yeah,
Uh,
I give, if anything, Toyota a lot of points from a car enthusiast perspective that you can get the loaded Corolla hatchback with the 6-speed manual. I really appreciate they allow you to do that because that's
yes,
not
yeah.
something you see very often anymore.
Oof. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally giving Toyota props for that. I mean, not a lot of automakers are doing that anymore, providing manuals. So,
Especially in the higher trims. If anything, it's always you want the crappy base version while still
yeah,
offer with a manual because it's cheap, but you can't. The second you add features, the Corolla sedans like that, the second you spec it up, suddenly the manual disappears. Mazda 3s, you want all-wheel drive one? Well, sorry, no manual.
sorry,
You
no
want a
manual.
GT?
Yeah.
No manual. You want a turbo? No manual. Like,
Ugh.
so it's
It's like,
it's always a shame to me because I prefer the manual, but I want the performance engines. So if I can't get the
mm,
high horsepower motor with the manual, then no point in buying it. So I'm
exactly.
glad to see they still offer it, especially in a Corolla, which I can't imagine there's a whole lot of manual models selling.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I can definitely see that. Yeah, because you're spending premium money, right? You said this is a premium car, right? So, not a lot of people are going to be spending a lot because, like, usually the association is you're spending a lot of money for an automatic, and you're spending less money for a manual.
Yeah, which does still tend to be the option. It's not too much you ever have to opt up to a manual and pay more, but sometimes it's starting to happen now just because it is so infrequent. If anything, it's usually just tracking one down. I know for me, shopping for Mark 7 wagons right now, ideally, I'd love to see if I could get my hands on a 6-speed all wheel drive model, and they just don't exist. It's
They just
all
don't
DFG.
exist. Oh
Um,
my god.
Yeah, it's the rarity of manuals definitely getting more and more noticeable. It's quite unfortunate, but
But hey, Mustangs still come in manual stock.
that's true. You'd still get the new GT3s got announced again, and that's coming with a manual.
Yep.
Um, we're still getting them. I don't know how many more years we have left. I don't think it's a lot longer, sadly,
No,
but
no.
it's going to be a sad day when it stops becoming a regularly accessible option. We're already getting there. I mean, gated
Yeah,
manual Ferraris aren't a thing anymore.
no.
Lambos, cars like that. That's left to the history books already at this point. So performance Audis, performance Porsches that are luxury, bigger, anything more than 4,000 pounds is now an automatic, basically. Hell, even that Mustang GT500 we talked about, only available in a dual clutch.
Yeah, it's really sad to see these go. I mean, like manuals are important to our sort of car culture. One could say that that is the case, right? It's just the aspect of having control or more control over the car. I don't know if you'd agree with me on that front.
Yeah, for sure. I think it just boils down to that added factor of control. DCTs are a pretty good transmission, but it's just another layer between the car and you that you're not feeling or you're not controlling anymore. Same reason why really old cars are most people consider some of the best handling in that golden era where the steering rack was you control. It was still maybe electric assisted, but it was you controlling it with your hands. There was no computer sensors between. The throttle body was manual. The brake, like everything was more direct connection, and I think the more of that stuff separates, the less you're going to feel connected to a car in general. And the
Yeah,
manual, I think, is just a really crucial part of that.
I definitely think you're on the nose on that for sure. You're definitely on the nose. So, I guess we sort of reached the end of sort of this part of the podcast where we discuss personal opinions and backgrounds and stuff like that. I suppose we should start talking about our background. Whoa.
Yeah.
Um, would you like to start, or would you like me to start for this one?
Oh, we could start off if you'd like here, Jeremy.
Okay. Well, I guess I should sort of speak for the both of us when I say we're both in the in a journalism program. Should we say where we go for this, or is that
I
too
don't
much
see
of
why.
a?
I'm all right
Uh,
sharing it if you are. At least I don't
okay,
think there'll be too
cool.
much
All right, I'll
stuff
reveal
coming
it.
here.
So we're Humber journalism students. We're in the bachelor's degree program. It's a fun 4-year program, and we came up with this podcast a long time ago. I think actually in our first year. We're in our second year now, and I think one of us said we can't remember for the life of us who said what, but one of us said we'd like to start a podcast, and we just don't have anybody to talk about car stuff with, especially because we wanted to do car related stuff.
Mhm.
And um, I think at one point we both decided, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it together. I mean, we both have an interest in cars, and we found that out through our oh goodness, I know the prof's name, but I can't remember exactly what class it was. I think it was it was social media. It was a
Oh, it
social media
was
class.
actually no, I believe if I remember correctly, it was in our department head, Dan Rowe. Shout out to Dan if you somehow found this podcast. Great department head. Um,
Fantastic, yeah.
and he was the teacher of our intro to journalism class, and I remember
Right.
that we had to do something about our favorite journalist. That was the topic, and I had done all this prep on Alex Roy, who anyone that's kind of involved in auto journalism probably knows him. Considered a bit of a douchebag by some people, and he does come across as a little standoffish. But I love his writing personally, and I think he's a very intelligent person. Uh, so I chose him. And before I even had a chance to present, Jeremy went up who I don't think I'd even interacted with before, and yeah, presented good old Jeremy Clarkson, I believe, was who you chose, was it
Yes,
not?
I did. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Someone I also almost considered. Glad I didn't, because that would have been awkward. So it was like
Yeah.
him, Matt Farah, and Alex Roy. Those were the three I was like trying. I was flip flopping between. So
Yeah, and wow, I actually remember that class. That was a fun class. I remember not doing too well and quoting a Jeremy Clarkson quote that was a little unfortunate. Um, Maybe not classroom friendly. I can't remember exactly what the quote was. I
I
think I have it.
remember I remember that one because it was very clearly like an adult British quote, because like the demographic in the class that you could tell was older like chuckled, and then the
Yeah.
demographic of younger looked either uncomfortable or confused. It was a mix of the two. You could tell which people clearly like were too young to like truly grasp the humor.
Yeah, do you remember what the quote was about, or did, because I've forgotten.
It was a
It's
very British line, something about, a block of cheese like a woman's leg, kind of silly, very it was a very peak Jeremy line for sure.
very peak Jeremy Clarkson, and yeah, we just sort of talked about car stuff. We just sort of got really in the groove. I mean, at the time, I still am friends with Aiden, but shout out to Aiden if you find this, Aiden Besco, great guy. And yeah, we just started talking car, and then Aiden was like, "What are you guys talking about? I have no idea what you're going on about." And that's when we just sort of knew that we could do something with this, and we can harness this sort of nerdy sort of interest in cars and turn it into something special, perhaps. And so one night we started making some recordings, and I guess maybe at some point we'll release some early recordings of the podcast. I
Yeah,
think
maybe a
some
blooper of some sort.
Yeah, because I think in the early times we weren't. I mean, or at least I felt that I wasn't doing too hot. I think there was at one point where I literally stopped talking because I had nothing to say. I was just confused, and you were so good at keeping the conversation going. And through those, like I think it was like 3, 4 recordings that we did in your basement, um, we uh, I learned sort of how to keep a podcast going and sort of how to keep a conversation going. And so it's pretty comfortable now. It's pretty cozy now. We've now got a more professional setup. I mean, hell, I'm in my bedroom with a mic that I didn't own at the time we started the podcast. I was actually using a mono mic at the time. So if we do release the recordings, which we might, what do you say to that, Ben? Do you think we should release the old recordings?
Yeah, I mean, I guess let us know to anyone, any listeners in the comments as we continue to record if you'd like to see any of that stuff. But I think that could probably be arranged. We dig out some of those old chestnuts.
I mean, I think that I think that we both grew a fair amount through those 4 recordings and those 4 nights
For
that
sure,
we
I think it was
spent.
good. It was good practice, I think, and obviously, even now we're gonna continue to get better, and these are still very clearly are working at the cake times.
Oh
So
yeah, I mean, especially during the school year, or at least the college school year, it our minds are in thousands of different places, and mine is currently thinking about a video assignment that I have to do later. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the podcast now, and
yeah,
that's where
exactly. It's always
that's where
tricky
we.
when you're recording not to be thinking of the 19 things you're doing after you're recording and stuff.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start off by saying I'm 19 years old. I got into cars when I was very little. There is a fantastic photo of me as a child, which maybe I'll find for the sake of the podcast, where uh, you could see where I peaked, where I really, really, I still really, really like cars, but where it really became prominent, where we just knew, or at least my parents just knew that I loved cars. I guess I can pull it up now. Share that screen. Here we go. That's the moment. That's
Oh,
that's
look at that.
that is the moment when, and you can probably tell what Gen Jetta that is. I think
Oh,
that's
I
a
can
Yeah, oh yeah. And I remember this moment. I kind of remember this moment fondly. For some reason, I have weird memories of me as a child doing these things. I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna pause the share just in case, because I'm gonna try and find another photo. Uh, let's see if I can actually find another one. But yeah, no, it was a very pivotal moment where we just sort of found out. Yeah, Jeremy is really into cars. He's not going to change really anytime soon, and that just sort of continued when a friend of my parents were pushing me in a stroller, and I just kept saying, "What car is that? Whose car is that?" And it just sort of grew from there. Um, little things. I can just start sharing. Resume share. There's another one. Um, check that out. Right by the quote unquote new
New Beetle.
Beetle.
I remember those days. The old new Beetle.
Oh my god.
Oh,
Yeah. And my love for cars sort of kept going. I think I one of my first cars that I really became entranced with, if that's the right word, was the PT Cruiser. If you remember those, I'm sure you do.
How
And
can
that
how could
later
I ever
on,
forget?
of
I've drank,
course.
but I need to try, but it's still in my brain, so,
Well, that car actually gave me a nickname when I turned 13. And that nickname was the preteen cruiser. You can laugh at that one. That's totally fine.
That's awesome. I
The
appreciate that.
preteen cruiser. Um, but we'll go back a bit. Uh, maybe I can tell you. I'll tell the story why I was called that. But anyways, yeah, and then I sort of fell in love with the Ford Mustang when my grandfather bought his in 2005. And I'll pause this again just so I can pull up the photos. But he bought a 2005 Ford Mustang, brand new. Unfortunately, a family member had passed away, and he was given a fair amount of money, and he was pretty sad at the time. But he decided that I'll treat myself with this. This is a 2005 Ford Mustang GT Premium. It has the Shaker 500 system in it, and it's got all pretty much all the bells and whistles. It's not the Shaker 1000. He decided that he didn't want a rolling stereo, um, and I kind of get that. But even the Shaker 500
Particularly
system.
for the older demographic, I can't imagine he would ever use it anyway to the extent of what you need for the upgrade.
Funny you should mention he loves listening to the Can and any kind of instrumental music you can think of, like really old classic instrumental music, Orpheus in the Underworld, that kind of stuff. Yeah, he dare I show this video? Oh, it's a sad moment,
Oh,
really.
is this a breakdown video?
Yeah. So basically, what happened was the computer decided that the car was it was kind of going in limp home mode, and then the engine just shut off.
Oh,
Basically,
fun.
yeah, and so that's why it's being towed
Usually
because
that's the job for Germans, the electrical failure. What's it doing?
yeah, well, there was some sort of, I can't remember if it was a module of some sorts, but
Body
uh,
modules.
yeah, something like that, where the car basically thought that it was dying or that it was throwing a rod knock. It thought that it
Uh,
was throwing a rod knock, and so
that
we
was
ended up
like my
having.
Mazda once. I got really stressed out because the engine sounded like it hydro locked, it like water logged itself or something. And it turned out that the crank sensor had just essentially, I had to do some work on the bottom of the engine. So I had to pull the sensor out. I didn't realize that the way the crank sensor seated in, if you didn't plug it in just right, it wouldn't quite sit. And the engine basically skipped itself where it couldn't read the crank sense. And it just, to the engine, it thought it killed itself because it's like, oh, I can't, I'm not cranking. I guess I'm dead then. So it's the trade off of the computers in newer cars, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like this car has given my grandfather a fair amount of troubles, and I can probably tell you most of them. Number one, what is the one thing that stands out to you the most with this car?
The fact that it's convertible.
There you go, right there. Problem number one: the roof leaks right into the trunk all
Yeah, it
the
doesn't.
time.
Has it
Uh,
done that since new, or is that a more recent development?
no, it's a recent development. And my grandfather has his way of dealing with it is throwing the cover on the car. It's a Mustang. It's a custom Mustang cover. No surprise there. To prevent water leaking into the trunk. He also had water leaking into the dash. That was fun. And oh god, he's had to. I think he they're now quoting him $2,000, probably more now, to get that top replaced because that's basically what they're telling him he needs to do for that
Yeah, I
problem.
mean, if he's still in the original top, it makes sense that it'd be worn out by now. Convertible tops in general tend to wear out fairly quick. I mean, you can see this older Mustang in this image in the background. Its top
Yeah.
clearly has the bar marks worn into it. Even my friend, I was in last month, I was in BC visiting, or 2 months ago, a friend of mine, and his landlord has a really clean S2000, an early AP1, and his S2000 only has 65,000 or something original kilometers, but that soft tops was still torn in two spots and had the big ugly bar marks rolling through the roof because it's
Yeah.
just what happens sadly over time with those. And doesn't I imagine it's the same thing with the leaks? You know, the seals just wear out over time from the
Hmm.
roof coming up and down over the years.
Yeah, no, he's had numerous problems, especially with the windows, though the window regulators, not the regulators, but the motors where, because when you open the door, the window goes down a bit, and then you swing open the door, right? And then when you close the door, it goes back up. He had problems where it wouldn't go down, or the battery just flat out died. Um,
Yeah, that's a real problem too, because especially if he's, I guess, a little luckier having both a convertible and having
convert,
a summer car, so to speak. But
right?
the
Yeah,
anything that roof, that window design in the wind that you have to winter drive, horrible, because if your battery dies or that glass doesn't slide down and there's ice buildup or any, like you can I've seen people shatter the windows trying to pull them out of the car when they're jammed into that piece of
yeah,
glass because they're not meant to be opened at that point. Um,
yeah.
so you can really seriously do some damage with that, or you can mess with your seals. I know I was just watching recently. I don't know if you've caught it at all on YouTube, Jeremy, but Sorted, the new show with Matt Farah, Amelia Hartford, and Rob Ferretti, testing a bunch of performance cars.
Oh yeah, yes, I did. I caught a little bit of it. Yeah.
Yeah, one of their, I don't remember which episode it was, probably one or two, I think to two, but one of the episodes, they were out driving one of the cars there that was a 335i, or
Hmm.
sorry, no, a 135i, I should say. And this one series had the same issue. It's window switches where the window didn't quite seal properly anymore into the door. I don't know if it was the mods, if it was the fact this guy had gutted it because it was a race car, so there's no trimming around the windows
Oh
there.
no, yeah.
Either way, the result was when they were doing over 100, 130 miles an hour, all you could hear was the of the wind sucking through the little
Oh
gap in that door.
no.
And it was deafening on video. And like I can't imagine how they drove through it at, in an 800 horsepower car doing like 160 miles an hour.
My God. Well, there's a couple of neat little quirks and features that come with this car. Sorry, Doug, I borrowed your term, uh, your phrase, quirks and features.
Big
This specific car, we did at the same time. This specific car has the problem where in 2005, the original S197 hoods had a rusting problem right around the front edges right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor,
Oh
but
yeah.
right around that front edge. I think I airbrushed this picture just enough so you can't see it, and I don't blame myself for doing that. But there is bubbling here, and if you winter drive these cars, you will notice that they like completely corrode on that front
Yeah.
part.
I hold a rot right out.
And there was a class action lawsuit, and Ford won. So to those people who were really pissed that their hoods were like on their new cars were already bubbling over and rusting out or like rotting out completely, they just had to suck it up and buy new hoods for their
Fun.
cars.
How
So
fun.
not fun, not fun at all. But yeah, no, basically my love for Mustang started with this specific car. The S197 platform has always been my favorite out of all of the platforms. I don't know about you. You don't seem like a Mustang man yourself, but I'm sure you have a favorite gen.
Yeah, I think I've kind of talked to you a little bit about it. I'm a big fan of the handling heavy Mustangs. So the new GT350 and GT350R, of course, I love.
Right. Yeah.
I kill to own. I must admit, it's less the Mustang I'm attached to, and more I would love to have that Voodoo engine in basically any car. Doesn't have to even be the Mustang per se. But
Yeah.
I really like GT350s. I'm a big fan of the 2011 to 15 Mustang GTs. I thought about for a while buying one as like a summer car and doing what a lot of people do with Mustangs, the bolt-on of the centrifugal supercharger,
Yeah.
um, or a twin screw on top, like a Roush kit, and getting to 700 horsepower. Super easy. Their Mustangs are a great car for just doing the bolt-on mods to
The
get to
bolt-on
700, 800,
mods.
or just quick mods to get to 500. I know one of my friends has been talking about buying a GT next summer, like a PP2, and just throwing on basically headers and exhaust intake air breather mods, basically getting to 500 horse and leaving it at that. And they're a car that you can do that, and it'll run for hundreds of thousands of miles without issue.
Right. Yeah.
Especially,
And
I think that
sorry, go
newer the
on.
Mustang you get, the better you get too. Like I think the newer ones continue to get more reliable. At least the
Yeah.
interiors have also gotten a lot better. I really like the styling of that era of Mustang that you were just sharing on the screen here. But
Hmm.
personally, it seems like you did have some reliability issues, and it's got kind of a known poor quality interior. I think that's probably the biggest thing the Mustang did in recent years with the 2015 is stepping up into a significantly nicer interior material.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of plastic in that interior. It's just plastic. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's like old Corvettes. It's the same thing. Corvettes had the infamous C6 with the Cobalt steering wheel in it.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
like it's really until the last decade or so, honestly, was finally when economy cars started getting half decent interiors put in them.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, either way, I don't know. It was something about the sound of the 4.6, which some people hate, especially in that generation. Uh,
Speaking of the 4.6, another Mustang I'll give a shout out to that I would love to own, specifically because it's a Mustang too. So this one I just want to own, period. The '05 era Terminator. I also adore
oh,
the black on black Cobras with the cowl hoods and all that stuff. I think those things, especially if you can get them to 600-700 horse, that
the
as you just talked
O4s?
about, yeah, the O4s or whatever there. I think that 4.6 just sounds incredible.
Yeah.
That's super, and I love the look of that body style. The facelifted, if I remember correctly, that's the facelift SN95, correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that facelift model, I really like the look of to begin with, and I think Terminators, if you get them in all black and stuff, and you do the R front grille where it's just the Mustang
Yeah.
logo and no mesh, like the classic, what you do to all the Mustangs.
Yeah.
I think it looks gorgeous in that spec.
Yeah, you're totally right on that. I mean, I've been to plenty of Mustang shows, yes, because as you may be able to guess, I am a tiny bit of a Ford guy, and like Ben there, he's got you wouldn't say a bias towards Mazda, but you have. What would you
I
say?
think I probably have a bit of a bias, but I think both of us are good at acknowledging and understanding our own biases to our
Oh yeah,
cars.
yeah,
My whole thing with Mazda, I guess, just like you would be with Ford, is you're not necessarily biased as much to Ford as you just really like Mustangs. In the
yeah,
same way that I'm actually not particularly biased to Mazda as much as I just really like speeds.
yeah,
So, particularly as I've been talking about all this podcast, I really recommend the new Mazdas to a lot of people, and I don't think I would buy any brand new Mazda myself. But that's just because they're cars that don't appeal to me as a client. They
mm,
appeal to other people. So I think the Mustang for you and the Speeds for me are just a car that seems to have grabbed our hearts.
yeah, yeah. Like hell, even my uncle, he owns. What did you start? Oh, there's the Terminator.
Yeah, this one was an old That Dude in Blue review. I remember infamously as being just the coolest. I remember it sounded cool in the review video. I remember it looked really cool in that style and that body kind of pattern right there. Those mods, a little bit of a lower. I think that car is just beautiful like that.
That is a very very solid design, and
Yeah,
they
just
did.
a
The
pretty looking
SVT did
car
a
for
really
sure.
good job with that car, especially.
Yeah, even the SN197s like the one you were showing, I think is still a beautiful car. Personally, I really like both of them. Honestly, from a stylistic perspective, I was a big fan of the old. I don't know if you ever watched the reboot of Knight Rider, but I
I
thought the
did, yes. Oh my
yes,
god, we could do a podcast on that too.
should do actually. I'll put that right in the doc right now. Big episode on Knight Rider.
Oh my
I have
god,
the
I've watched both series, the original and the quote unquote shitty one.
same here. I actually am quite a fan of the remake myself.
I love the remake. I'm just sad that they had to kill it. That
Yeah, I'm sad
broke
it
my
wasn't
heart.
this season. Like it had the feature movie or whatever, the direct to TV movie, and
Oh my god, yes. I've recently
season.
watched that again. Yeah.
Yeah, I literally like in my basement right now in my bedroom. I have an entire box set of the show, the
Oh,
new reboot on
same.
TV. Yeah, so with the movie and everything. So yeah, I love that franchise. I remember as a kid watching the cars transform. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Rewatching now, the special effects weren't very good, but it was also great product placement for Ford because they would give reasons for Kit to transform into an F-150 and a Econoline like all the sport and
Yeah.
like it was a good plug for various Ford products.
Yeah, I even remember it turning into a flex for I can't remember what for. It was like a casino episode. He turned into a flex and it was so cool.
Yeah, I remember that. I think if I remember correctly, the timing of that was right around the Flex unveiling. So that was like basically a press play to be like, "Hey guys, look at this crazy new Ford we're building."
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed that show quite a bit.
That was the
So
'08 series Knight Rider. A lot of people hated it. I get why they hated it because it was kind of against the original Knight Rider series. So I mean, they had the Hoff come in for like, was it the feature movie or was it the first episode?
it was definitely the movie. I think he might have also been in the first episode. I could be mistaken though.
Yeah, it was a
It
really real weird meta moment where you see
was,
David Hasselhoff come in there. Oh my god, coming in his original character.
yeah, maybe
Uh
I'm a little bit the cast of that movie before the show, the cast of the show. Sorry, before it had even come out. Like Danielle Roy, if I remember the actress's name correct, or is it Diana McKenna?
Diana
Either way, the
Russo? Russo?
Russo.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
so. Yeah.
Um, she was a really good actress. I enjoyed her in that film. I haven't seen the male character that played Michael as
Justin
often, and
Bruning or whatever. Justin Bruning.
things I've seen him in, I enjoyed him in as well. He's a bit of a default military guy, but he plays the role well.
Oh, he plays the role so well. Like I think I started to notice when it was going downhill when they started killing characters off.
Yeah, it's never a good sign.
No, it's like that's when we knew NBC was going to kill him off, kill the
Yeah, unless
show.
you're Game of Thrones, where you just kill to recycle the characters, or Grey's Anatomy, or
Yeah.
other. It's yeah. Besides that, you kind of have to worry a little bit about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely see that. Yeah. um I don't know, is there anything else that I haven't mentioned that would be helpful to the viewer?
I guess if you want to go through, I guess your family's current vehicle background. Before you do that, I don't know, just look at the timestamp we're at this week. I don't know if you maybe want to do your introduction this week, and then maybe next week's big topic we can go through my intro and my vehicle history a little bit,
Yeah, what is
since
the timestamp on
I,
this?
we're just about to hit. We're nearing 2 hours now, so.
Well, did we go 2 hours? I think we went almost over, like we went 3 hours last episode.
Yeah, we did. So I feel like if we want to keep this one maybe a little bit more in check here, if we
I
maybe
mean,
want to.
I don't know. I mean, Matt Farah's podcast, he went on for 3 hours with Doug DeMuro. But then again, Doug DeMuro's a pretty interesting guy. I don't know. I don't know what
Yeah,
our
no, I'm
viewers think of us. I
but yeah,
don't know.
if,
What
I
do you
guess we.
think? Do you have time, or do you wanna actually cut this one short?
Uh, I mean, we could do. Oh, let's do this. Let's do an intro of mine. But
Yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
save my in-depth vehicle thoughts to next week, maybe, and
Okay.
we'll maybe we'll key up maybe one or two topics, and then depending on how we run on time next week, we can choose how much we go through. But so folks, look out for, I guess, my personal vehicle background, particularly that stuff. Look for that next week, maybe when I go into a little bit more depth. But for this week, I'll just brush over kind of more of a top level, more about me, I guess you could say. So yeah, similar to Jeremy. Obviously, again, as he said, we're same program, journalism students. I did actually 2 years at Trent University before coming down to Humber College up in Peterborough, Ontario. Um, so I'm somewhat in, I guess, my fourth year of school now, in a roundabout sense. What Let's see what else about background, I guess, is a little different but important. I guess I already mentioned living in London for work right now, because it is somewhat vehicle related. I drive company cars for work. I'm a sales representative for Frito-Lay, which is Lay's potato chips, Ruffles, Doritos, etc. So I'm a professional chip slinger, as I like to make the joke about. But it means I get to drive a little bit in the way of company cars. My company vehicles are, and I'll actually see if I can dig up some pictures here as I'm talking, but it's a Mercedes Sprinter is what we used to carry. Well, technically, I guess way back in the day, we used to carry Ford Econolines. Then we switched years ago, like 15 or so years ago, to the Mercedes Sprinter. And then from the Sprinter, we switched now a couple years ago into the diesel Ford Transits. So my main kind of two work vehicles I've driven have been the Mercedes Sprinters. Just about all of ours are new enough. They have the 3-liter V6 diesel, the CDI engine, and the Ford Transits have the newer EcoBoost. I believe it's 3.2-liter 5-cylinder turbo diesel. I don't believe I have any Transit pictures, but I know I just found a Sprinter picture, so I'll share this one quickly out into our handy dandy podcast here, and go through this. But so you guys can get a bit of a frame of reference what these things look like. But here's the gigantic beast that is our um, Frito-Lay Sprinter. So this is
Wow.
one of the better conditioned ones, although you can still kind of see in this image the lovely rust buildups here. And you can see a lot of the leak marks that are infamous for this era Sprinter. Usually, if you have the regular, panel models down the side, you'll see all the rust drip marks from the moisture that pools up into the channels in the body cladding and kind of slowly eats through the body. But this is probably actually one of the best conditioned ones you're looking at right now. You can see it's an older model in the way that it's been sun damaged a lot on like the Frito-Lay logo and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But still holding up pretty well. I think that one had most stuff other than working AC. But yeah, that's kind of what I mainly drive on a day to day. I also drive. I'll pause the share here so I don't accidentally share some descriptive images. But I also occasionally will get some seat time in a international. Um, I don't know what I'm terrible with semi trucks, but whatever the chassis code is for the essentially, the work truck spec of these or whatever, like the school bus spec is what I like to call it. So like kind of like the introduction internationals that aren't necessarily the uh, the nicest ones, nor are they the highest tow capacity or capability, but they're the cheap, affordable ones that rental companies buy, and people that are using them for fleet vehicles. Here's actually a lovely picture of it beside my old Speed 3. So that's another one of the company vehicles I tend to be rolling in. That's about the biggest thing I'll drive is the NV Internationals. And this one, or all of ours for that matter, are Penske rentals. So they're equipped with the 6.7 liter Cummins straight six turbo diesel engine. You can also have these Internationals with either a diesel International V8 or a diesel, or no, sorry, not V8, straight six as well. And a diesel H9 Cummins straight six, which I think is just another like 600 pound-feet of torque or something. But those are kind of my main three, I guess, work vehicles. You'll see me driving around a lot. So if, maybe I think I've mentioned before, but I'm going to probably do eventually a larger topic blowing out, talking about my Frito-Lay time and kind of my experience with the work trucks there. Similar to next week, probably look out for me talking about my own personal vehicles, which since it's already in the frame, I'll mention it briefly here. This is or was my baby, my 2007 Mazda Speed 3. Probably the car I've loved the most. I mean, it was my dream car since I was 10 or 11, my like obtainable car I hope to own. Unfortunately, it was in an accident, so I don't have it anymore. Fairly minor collision, but enough to write it off still nonetheless. So that car is no longer in my possession. Um, Here's actually an image for those curious. I think I attached a photo last week for the podcast too, but that's the damage from the car on its last legs. So not in my ownership anymore. That's why I'm down to just that Jetta that you guys all saw earlier. But this was my old summer car previous to that. Um, Otherwise, my previous vehicles, and again, I'll go over them in more detail next week, but my first car was a 2006 Ford Focus ZX5 SES. So it was the Ford Focus hatchback. It was this lovely shade of blue. Her name was Felicity. I name all my cars also as well. For anyone that judges people to do that, screw you. But I choose to do it. So get lost if you think it's dumb. I mean, everyone do themselves. Don't give people crap for things that you don't choose to do. Um, but anyway, so I had this. This one was Felicity. Selena was the name of my old car there. Um, so this was my first car, and probably the car to this day I've still done the most work to myself. You can see it was a pretty transformed car. Here's an image of it to around the time it was completed, and had a lot of aesthetic changes more than anything. Anyone that knows these Focuses knows there's not much you can do for performance parts. It's not really a point even trying. There was no real hard performance versions of this era. So it had upgraded wheels from a 2011 Focus. Speaking of Knight Rider earlier, this is from the 2011 Focus coupes and loaded sedans. Window tint, aftermarket headlights, aftermarket taillights. It was a pretty good looking car overall. I was a big fan of these tails. Are always what made it for me. I think this generation of Focus looks terrible with the factory taillights because it's got that whole issue where the lights go to wrap around here and they put them so high that you get this weird like blotch of red in the middle of, especially of my car, which is blue. It's just a blotch of red around a whole bunch of blue, which I always thought looked quite strange. Um, I actually probably still have old images of it, but I always thought it was like just the worst. Yeah, here's a great one. I think it's just those fact
Hmm.
those factory taillights were so bland. There's a before photo for so this is what the car looked like when I bought it. Paint was in great condition.
Yeah.
As you can see by the reflections of the other 2012 3 I mentioned in earlier parts of the podcast. Um, I was actually, I sometimes miss this car. It wasn't great to me, but I give it credit for it looked good. I did a lot of custom work to it, so it always felt like it was mine. Um, there's kind of the taillights at night when they were on. I always thought it had a cool
Wow.
look to it with all the LED. It was basically a million little LEDs, and then I put, aftermarket LED reverse lights and stuff in too. So it had speakers and exhaust on it, and next week I'll blow through it and show an exhaust video of it and stuff too. But similar to my Mazda, and I swear this isn't a pattern. I'm actually a half decent driver. I just drive a lot So statistically speaking, I'm more likely to get in accidents. I will own my last one is being I won't specify in details, but
Nope.
that one I feel more guilty about for various reasons. This one I think is little to no responsibility on my end, but this is how this that car ended its life. This is a much more significant accident than
Oh my
my
god.
mom. But that was the remnants of what was left on old Felicity before I got rid of her. So not the greatest result, but that car was never really perfect. It always was giving me problems, especially after I started putting some mileage on it. For how new it was, I think it should have been better than it was, to be honest. Um, there's it when I put it back in my garage before I actually, you can kind of see how much the whole frame had shifted
Mm.
in place too. The car was pretty mangled when we first dropped it in there.
Yeah.
So there was no saving. That was one I didn't have to have a body shop look at because I knew the second I hit the guy that the car was dead. So
Mm.
that's what happens when you go into a Silverado head on, almost head on, doing like when they're doing like 60, and I wasn't
Jeez.
moving at least, but surprisingly no injuries and airbag deployment of that accident. But those are the only two cars that have been in an accident. I haven't crashed any of the other ones I'm about to talk about. um, the three other ones I've owned. I'm on Carly. My Jetta wagon is my fifth car now. So some of the other cars I've owned, I had a 2000 Dodge Durango, fittingly named Rango. I wasn't the most creative with that one, but tis what I chose to name it. It was that or like Bertha or some sort of fat car joke name. Um, oh, here's a great picture I'll use for it, simply because it's doing the closest to off roading it ever really got. Um, this was my old dingo, and yeah, 2000 SLT, had the 4.7 PowerTech in it, terrible engine. um, the truck was a piece of shit. I had it for like 6 months. The heater core failed on me after two, but it was pretty unkillable, and it did solid in the snow. So for the brief time I owned it, other than the fact that I spent like $2,000 in fuel in less than 3 months, I actually quite enjoyed my ownership with it, all things considered, and I paid very little money for it, so I couldn't even really complain when it failed on me.
Mm.
Um, I'm trying to think if there's any other photos worth sharing of that car, but it honestly was also one I did no mods to it. I put nothing into it. It very much was designed as a winter beater to the purest extent. I didn't want to have to do anything to it. Um, so that was that was a bit of a brief life. Same thing with my other winter beater. Carly's the only one that I've really owned for a very long time. My other winter beater here I'm introducing, whose name was, hold on, Veronica, is also another BWTDI. This one was a 2004 Golf. So similar, same engine as my Jetta. Just this one had a VNT 1722, which is a turbo upgrade, really common in the TDIs. Anyone in that world knows them well. Pt.150 intake, um, you know, Malone tune, upgraded dog bone, things like that. Anyone in the VW world knows all that terminology well. There's the two of them together there, her and Selena. I always actually love this. This is a great image example because you can actually see someone I think wrote choo choo. But you could see the sheer amount. This car might have not been the most emissions compliant car in
Mm.
Ontario, so it had a lot of smoke marks on the back, which was always my favorite thing about this car. You could drive it anywhere in traffic, and every car behind you would change lanes within like 500 feet if you managed to add more than 10% throttle. It was quite hilarious to watch. People really hated this car. I loved it, but I guarantee you any normal human being was not a fan.
Must say I love the wheels on that, by the way.
The Jetta there, or
Yeah.
not the Jetta, sorry, the Golf. Yeah,
The Golf, yeah.
yeah, she was a pretty car. I ended up selling these wheels eventually, but as you can see here, yeah, she was quite a pretty vehicle. Um,
Very pretty.
I for how cheap of a build it was. It was going to be a too cool to be a winter beater realistically, but it was just broken enough that I didn't feel bad doing it, and the car ended up just getting passed between my friends for like $500 each way for a couple of years. So the car really didn't end up living the greatest life. It needed a lot of work. Arguably, it was one of those vehicles that too many people had done half a project to it, that really someone needed to just yank the whole drivetrain out, inspect the motor, replace all the seal, and just kind of do a full, refresh from ground up, because it had just been too many people, too many hands had gone through the car without anyone cohesively fixing it and making it a working vehicle. Um, so if anything, I don't know how really worth it was fixing anymore, but some dude bought it at some point. So I don't know what he's doing with it at this point. But my friend still said he sees it drive around his town every once in a while. Um, he was actually her on her last day with me before it got hauled out with my buddy's Cummins. But we also that day cracked the oil pan in half getting it up the ramps into that trailer, but
Ah.
and snapped the bumper and intercooler off. That was awkward. We damaged one of the fins too because the intercooler broke right off the front of the car when we
Oh.
backed up the trailer. It was rough. Shifter linkage was broken, so we couldn't really limp it or anything. We kind of basically had to lock it into gear and then throw it onto the trailer. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that was an interesting result. That's kind of my main vehicle history, I guess. I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast as well before, but I spent 5 years working for Enterprise Rent a Car. So I have a lot of experience in various vehicles because of that. Obviously, you drive a little bit of everything. So I've driven at this point, I think I'm over 500 makes and models of vehicles at this point. I've got quite a bit of seat time between various models. But ownership wise, I'm kind of a one car at a time kind of guy. I don't personally bounce through a lot of builds. I know that the auto community kind of seems to be split. I don't know if I'm the same, Jeremy, where people, either tend to do like kind of quick things to a car and then immediately sell it and they go through like 15 cars a year, or they buy one car that they absolutely love and they keep it for 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, I haven't owned a car yet. I haven't been in that process yet. Although, my dream scenario is to be somewhat like Tyler Hoover. Of course, of Hoovie's Garage. I love what he's doing, even though he's said on numerous occasions, "Don't do what I do. Don't do that. That's how you go bankrupt." But I don't know. For some reason, it's so attractive to me to have, or the idea of having like three or more cars is just so tempting, right? I don't know about you, but
Yeah, I'm definitely the same way. I know I have a list of, and I think we did again our rough pre-podcast episodes version of this, and we'll probably do again another version down the road. But our dream cars, our top cars we want to get, and I know Jeremy and both would like much larger collections than either of us have right now. So
I
I
mean,
know
look
I'm not
behind
dreaming.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Just need to turn those into real.
There you go.
Um, but yeah, so it's definitely not most dream setups, but I grow attached to cars. I don't really find the need to sell them super often, so
No.
uh, I will probably be selling my Jetta next year, and that car is not the best car. It's been problematic with me, and I still don't really want to sell it. I like the idea of bagging it and doing a bunch of diesel mods and making it roll coal and doing all these things, but I know that's not feasible for me to do right now, so I'm not
Mhm.
letting myself do it as much as it takes all the resistance in the world to not be just dumb with money and build more cars. But yeah, that's kind of, I guess, my main vehicle backgrounds. I guess I should also mention as well, for added context. I know Jeremy mentioned his age. I don't know if I've brought it up yet. I'm 23. So I do have a couple of years, obviously, on Jeremy, which is why I have the added vehicle history. Just been driving
Yep.
longer, so I've written off more cars in like over the years, but it's like because I've been driving for double the year round or whatever. So especially, I imagine too, I can't say definitively, but Jeremy, growing up in Toronto, I imagine you didn't have as many requirements to drive places. It was more trying to get practice by finding somewhere to go drive or a reason to go drive. And if anything, I
Yeah.
can't imagine it was super far you'd have to drive. I know when I grew up, at least when I got my license, my mom's work was 30 kilometers from her house. My school was 20 kilometers from our house. And when I got my own job, that was 25 kilometers from our house. And they were all in opposite directions. So I got a lot of experience driving when I was pretty young, simply because there wasn't a lot of choice. I just had to learn how to drive, and I had so many situations I had to drive to. Living in the country, public transit wasn't a thing. I hadn't taken the bus in my entire life until I started university. Um, I had never taken a train until I moved to Toronto. Like it never came up. It was not necessary.
Mhm.
I lived in a rural situation. Didn't take cabs. I didn't until I started drinking, things like that. So yeah, it gave me a nice bit of early driving experience. I don't think I'm in any means a perfect driver, but I don't think anybody is. But I think I definitely have more experience than the average person. Your age, my age, whatever. Younger, I average between 30 to 50,000 kilometers a year of driving. I know the national average is like 18,000 or something, so I'm far over the national. I put, and that doesn't include rental car mileage of how far I drive enterprise vehicles. God only knows what that would add in.
Hmm.
I plan on one day trying to actually add this up. Next year, I'm going to try and actually meticulously monitor my driving in each car I do to see what it totals up to at the end of the year, because I'm very curious to how much it is. Because as I said earlier in the podcast too, um, 2 weeks or whatever, 3 weeks in that Corolla, I put 2,000 kilometers on it. I don't even know where I went. It's COVID. I don't have people to visit. I don't know how I put 2,000 on it. I still managed to put 2,000 kilometers on it. So I tend to drive a lot, whether I want to or not. My Focus, I wrote off in under 2 years of ownership. I put 50,000 kilometers on it in that 2 years before I even crashed it. So um, my Mazda, I put 55,000 on. My Jetta, I put 30 on. My Durango, I put 15 on. My Golf, I only put like 1,000 on because it was always broke. But like, yeah, I've taken rental cars on 10,000K road trips. I've driven my dad's SUV 2013, no, 2014, sorry, Nissan Pathfinder cross country to Alberta from here in Ontario, which was like 40 hours. I've driven it to Boston. I've driven a Fusion to Boston. I've driven a Wrangler to Florida. I've driven a Pathfinder and a Grand Caravan to Florida. Um, so I've got a decent amount of seat time. I'd like to think with Enterprise, especially, that's given me the most skill at understanding differences between cars.
Hmm.
Um, Regardless of how much you drive, you won't necessarily be able to really understand benefits of one car over another until you try out competitors in the same segment, which is I think always a tricky thing with people when they say their own car drives bad or good or whatever. Is if you've only driven your own car and you only went in to test drive your car, it's hard to really definitively say that you have the best car or a great car.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of people that aren't in the industry tend to do. Obviously, we're a different breed here as people that are curious about every vehicle, but um, yeah, I think it's kind of like a basic little bit about me. I'm trying to think if there's anything more auto relevant I need to bring up here, but I think that's kind of most of my main things. I guess I should also mention, I know I brought up my mom's vehicle. I'll briefly just cross over some of the other family cars I've driven over the years that I'll mention. A couple of the current generation Dodge Grand Caravans pre-facelift. I've driven in '08 to 2010 of that era. My dad used to have a 2011 Equinox, so I spent a lot of seat time in that. Um, and my stepmom for a while had a Lincoln MKX, so I spent a decent bit of time driving that. The current generation before it was renamed the Nautilus. Um, so that's the one I drove the most of. She had a white one before that. That was the previous generation. It was a 14, if I remember correctly. I didn't really drive that one at all, so I won't speak too much on that car. But yeah, those are kind of, I guess, the vehicles I have the most seat time in outside of rental cars and things like that. Jeremy, what about you? I know you spend a lot of time driving obviously your parents' vehicles, still living at home as I also am. So you just like me with my mom's Mazda, putting some seat time on that. I know you spent some time driving your parents' car, so just if you want to mention those vehicles quickly.
Yeah, I'll give your voice a little break there. It sounds like it's getting a little challenging over there. Um, yeah, no. The Sorry.
Said it is water o'clock for sure.
All right. Well, while he goes off to get some water, I suppose I'll fill you in on what I drove. So the first ever car I drove was a Honda CRV, a 2006 or seven Honda CRV. I cannot remember the exact one. I think it's 2006. It is the one that people generally don't like, but soccer moms. There are a lot of soccer moms in my area who have them. They're very popular amongst like I would say soccer moms. I'm trying to avoid using the almighty K word, Karen, because that does have a lot of power behind it. But what I will say is it was a base model car, totally stripped down. It did have an aux jack. That was the nice part about it. Steering was a little sloppy, but it was okay. Uh, Throttle response was, oh boy, woof. It was also a bit sloppy as well. I wasn't a huge. It wasn't a performance vehicle, of course. It was an automatic, because of course when you're learning on any car, you generally want to start with an automatic. I don't know about you, Ben, if you launched right into manuals. Um,
I did not know. I got my car. My Focus was my first car, and I got that a year and a half after I started driving at 16. So roughly halfway through 17, I got that car. So yeah, I drove just on my mom's Mazda and my dad's Equinox when I first got my G1. And actually, if I remember the timeline correctly, I believe my dad would have just been getting rid of his van as I got my G1. So I think I'd
Ah.
driven it maybe before I was licensed in parking lots, we'll say. And then when I switched, he switched to Equinox, and yeah, I learned. So I learned on my mom's automatic 3, my dad's automatic Equinox.
Right.
Um, the closest I got to kind of that full immersion. And yeah, as Jeremy said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend someone learn to drive on a stick shift unless they're already comfortable with stick shift before they're comfortable driving on a road, like a farm kid or something where they had to drive stick tractors and things like that. They understand how clutches already work.
Hmm.
They can maybe learn on that. But I definitely would not try to teach people right away on stick. I'd rather they learn on one car and then learn stick separately as a second event because it's just an extra step you really don't need to have to make them deal with. It's like making someone
Right.
learn learn how to drive a car with manual steering or something. Like you don't really have to like make
No.
them struggle that hard at the very
Yeah.
beginning.
Well, I guess I can speak a little more to the CRV. It was overall, I thought it was a great car. We beat the shit out of it near the end of its life. It had, I think, upwards of 200 to almost 300,000 kilometers on it, so it was time to go. And I do miss that car from time to time because I used to know how to handle it. I knew pretty much all the way around that car when I was in it, so I had very good control of it. Never crashed in it. I've never had an accident in my life, even though I've I've had less seat time in a car than Ben has. So, yeah, I was sad to see that car go. But then my mother traded that in for a Honda. I can't believe I'm struggling to find the name for it. Honda Cross Tour. It's a 2014. Fantastic car based on the Accord platform. Some people hate it. I understand why you hate it. If you do hate it, if you have seen one, um, I like it because it's comfortable. It's fast. It's got a V6, better than the 4 cylinder that was in the CRV. Although, um, actually, no, the V6s in the Accords are reliable. We did talk about this earlier in our previous podcast where we covered the Accord. The Accord
Mhm.
platform is a very solid platform, and that car is just giving it more. I don't know. I don't know, Ben. What would you say about the Cross Tour? I mean,
I think it's just more, I guess, more character than anything to a regular Accord, and obviously more space. If you get an Accord and you think this car is too small for me, I want kind of more of a crossover, but I don't want the boring
yeah,
CRV platform. It's definitely more of a light. I guess it's a lifestyle CRV. You could maybe call it.
you
Um,
could, because this one's more luxurious than a
also,
CRV. That
also
was
true,
It was way
and
more
it
luxurious. Yeah,
Yeah, and it had its time. I mean, the Accord platform, I think, is already nicer to begin with than a CRV platform,
yeah,
and then you
yeah.
add to that the tie-ins to the Acura version of the Cross Tour as well.
Yep.
You definitely got a nicer interior in that Accord Cross Tour model versus a regular Accord.
Oh yeah, no, and this one came with this was the first time my mother ever had a car with a sunroof, so that was kind of a big deal. Um, but it has a sunroof, it's got the premium interior package. 2014 technology is always fun to laugh at whenever you have the chance to use it. Because this one in particular, my god, the infotainment system is slow. We'll go with that. It's a bit slow. But that's to be expected, especially since that kind of technology was sort of new at that time. I mean, BMW was doing that in the, I would say, mid to late '90s. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, something in that timeline. I can't remember the exact first, but
Yeah, somewhere around there. And so, uh, the technology in the cars is just fairly nice. But overall, the ride quality is great. I've been driving that car ever since. One thing I'm very good at, especially when I'm behind the wheel, is I'm very spatially aware of where, especially because I'm good at knowing where my wheels are and where the front bumper is, which is
I think
something.
a lot of driving comes down to that. I think people tend spatial awareness is a tricky one to teach people too. I find people seem to either have a natural knack at it or just none at all. I
Yeah.
I find people that I remember in high school didn't have great spatial awareness aren't any better when I ride in a car with them now. Similar to
Mm.
how people I think that were great when we were young are just as good now. I think spatial awareness is one of those things that definitely it's good to be blessed with
Oh yeah.
from a young age.
Like, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm very good with knowing where my wheels are, of course. And every time my mother gets real close to with those barriers at a parking lot, I'm always like, whoa, 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 whoa! Like you're getting way too close for comfort. Even I know you're getting too close. It's like I know this car better than you, and you drive this way more than I do. So
Yeah, exactly. I'm lucky where both my parents are pretty skilled drivers. I think my mom far more so than my dad, but I think they're both above average, I would say. Not that it's saying a lot, because I think the average driver is very unskilled, but from what I've seen on the road, at least in my experience.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely it's good having a good spatial awareness. I think I got that from my mom. She was always, I remember as a kid, and we always made jokes about it when I started driving, because I was the same way. We're the kind of people that we see a parking spot, we're like, oh yeah, I can fit in that. Some people might have
Yeah.
that brief fit, but we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
immediately
Yeah.
be like that, and then we'll whip into the space, whip it into reverse, floor it into the spot. One foul swoop. It's super easy. Some
Oh yeah.
people are doing 25-point adjustments. They can't figure out the car.
Yeah.
Um, I think I also got a lot of good practice with that too. Again, enterprise, driving from a box truck all the way down to my own Mazdas, Mitsubishi Mirage, tiny things like that, and now all
Hmm.
the way up to that international I showed earlier. I've driven so many different sizes of vehicle. I've towed before. I've done like dump trucks, or not dump trucks. Sorry, I've done tow trucks and things like that. Like,
Really? Wow.
so I've got a bit of seat time, and I think enough different sizes that I've also gotten better at guessing on a car. When I look, I'm like, okay, this car, the bumper's here, which means I should roughly have this much room. Like, I'm pretty good at getting into a vehicle and immediately knowing how much space I've got. You kind of have to be an enterprise, or unless you're willing to just hit other cars, because you get into certain situations, certain parking lots that you just have to be really, especially when I started working in Toronto for the company.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
get good at kind of like downtown and places like that, when there's like a ram in a parking garage underground. Stuff like that's
Hmm.
a bitch and a half to get out for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and like you, much like you, I had my starts with driving around in parking lots, school parking lots in Halliburton. Sometimes they'd even let me go as far as driving from Lindsay to Halliburton. That's about a 2.5 hour, 1.5 hour drive. Um, it's a nice drive. You're riding on twisties, and um, I guess since I haven't fully gone through in court with this situation, maybe I won't talk about it. uh,
It's similar to my accident, I see.
similar to your accident. I didn't get into an accident, but I was, let's just say there was a dangerous driver, and I needed to get away from the situation. Maybe put that together in your mind. You might be able to figure that one out. And so yeah, no, I had a lot of fun with that, and I don't know. I guess I get my fun driving habits from my grandfather and watching him speed through the Minden Hills and Halliburton Highlands in his Mustang, going about 120, 130, 140. Yeah, because he's really good with that. And he'd even do it in his Buick, which was hilarious. He had a Buick LaCrosse, 2010 Buick LaCrosse. This thing was rolling everywhere. Like, this thing was
Oh, I
hilarious.
can't imagine that. My grandpa's a big enthusiast guy. As a kid, he used to work at a dealer, and he'd take cool cars in the dealership, and like a Corvette, and bring it back so we could go for a drive in it and stuff like that. And but his own car, he didn't drive. He drove those kind of spiritedly, but he babied his own car, because his daily at that time was a 1994 Buick Park Avenue, antique forest green
Wow.
with the plush red cloth interior, like leatherette. Classic quintessential old person Buick.
My
Um, I
God.
miss I miss that car greatly. Me and two of my cousins all complain. Two of my other cousins all complained that he sold it, because all three of us wanted to buy it when we were 16. I was like, just to get out of this car. It's just how ridiculous it would be if a young person drove it. Had like the soft closed trunk and everything too. Um,
Yeah.
oh, I miss that car. I have such good memories as a kid of. I still remember the smell of that cloth, like in my head. But that and my aunt's old '95 Sunbird. Those are the two cars I distinctly remember in my life. But
Yeah. Like I have some
um,
fun memories of my grandfather's Chrysler 300M. That
oh
was a
yeah, I
neat
remember those.
vehicle. I mean, granted, I think at one point it blew smoke through the air vents. That was not a fun time, but
Probably the heater core.
that was the heater core. Yeah, blew smoke through the air vents, and he had to get rid of the car eventually. Um, but yeah, no, bad times. Anyways, you were saying something. I cut you off.
Um, yeah, I was just kind of speaking on, yeah, memories of cars as a child or whatever. It's kind of funny thinking back to the old vehicles you kind of like grew up with. or whatever, and learn to drive on. I was kind of the same as you too. I was into cars from a very young age. I know when I got my first I want to say I was 1.5 or so when I started talking, and by the time I was 2, my parents always make a joke about it. I could name the make and model of my parents' vehicle, and
Same.
if we were going down the road in our old Escort wagon when I was a kid.
Yeah.
My mom would be riding around, and we'd drive past another Escort wagon, and I'd point, and I'd be like, "Hey, look, it's our car." And I could like point out the other Escorts on the road. I was car spotting from the age of 2.
Yeah.
Um, it never dissipated. My dad built me a go kart at some point as a kid that I used to rip around my neighborhood in small town Belmont where I grew up. I when I my friends in the country started getting dirt bikes and quads, I drove those whenever I could. The second someone offered me the keys to a car, I took that shot as fast as I could too, obviously.
Of course.
Um, and yeah, I've just always been really into vehicles. Really, it just boiled down to at a certain age. I started trying to figure out how I could make it a job, but I kind of always knew it was my main passion. I don't think there's ever been a hobby that's come close. There's other ones I care about significantly, but none to the extent that cars are
Yeah.
all encompassing in my life. There's a reason. As in high school, I was known as the kid that knew a lot about cars, and I went to a high
Oh
school with a
yeah.
lot of shop kids. I didn't even take shop classes, and I was still somehow known as the kid that knows all about cars.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it became a bit of a colloquialism for me. So
Yeah, I was very much the same. I was even able, I think in kindergarten, I was even able to name my kindergarten teacher's car. It was I even remember the year and what brand it was. It was a 1996 Toyota Tercel. Yeah.
oh, an old
Uh,
my shop teacher had a Tercel in high school.
Really? The more you
I
know.
was a
Wow,
senior
small.
Mercedes C300 was his summer car, and his beater was a Tercel.
Tercel, yeah. Yeah, no, I was always able to point it out, and I was always pointing out my principal's. Oh god, it was like a. I'm not good with Mercedes names, but it was the C class. It was a C class, but it was like a mid to high trim C class. I cannot remember what it was though. And go on.
Yeah, it's funny thinking back. Actually, my kindergarten teacher drove, if I remember correctly, a 2004 Mini Cooper S. I know it was red. I don't know what year it was exactly, but it was that first gen of the newer body style Mini Coopers. I know she had a S
Oh,
model of that too.
should we table this conversation for another episode of the podcast?
I probably could actually do a whole because I'm thinking back to my teacher in high school that had a motorcycle and kind of going down the list of various interesting vehicles that teachers had and students had. Hell, honestly, we could if we rolled students into that, we could definitely do a big topic on it because the stories I have of the lifted trucks of my high school are quite hilarious.
Oh
So
my goodness.
we'll have to
Yeah,
throw that on the pocket as once again another
that
future
would be a
topic.
very neat topic. Yeah. Oh, well, let's see where we are with timing. Holy moly. 2 hours and 36 minutes. That is impressive. At least it's not as long as our last episode.
Very true.
Yeah.
Um,
By the way,
nerd up.
shout out to friend of my girlfriend's father. If you are listening to this, hi. I'm glad you tuned in. I hope you're enjoying what you're listening to. This is our second episode. I'm sure you're aware of this now. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I haven't advised any of my closer friends about this show yet, but I imagine people will go digging through it eventually. I know we've already gotten a handful of requests from some people I know in the auto world that would like to come on for some episodes and such. So hopefully we continue to expand our repertoire.
Oh yeah, no, I mean like I immediately started getting interest from family members and friends and stuff like that who wanted to hear more about this and learn about it, and I as you might have been able to tell, I started posting about it on social media very quickly. Um
Yeah, it's a little funny actually. I tried to get this going years ago, and none of my friends seemed really interested to put in the work or to really sit down and record. Where they were like, "I like talking about cars. I don't want to do like a show. I just don't want to bother basically to do a show about it." And now half those people are the ones that are like, "Oh, you're doing a podcast about cars? Can I come on for an episode?" And I'm like, "Hey, what the like?
It's like what the
That's
hell,
not even
man?
want to do the work. You don't want to like make a podcast, but you're okay to come in on
You're okay to
someone's
be a
podcast. You can get
guest. Yeah, you just be a guest.
It's like me with one of some of my friends that do a gaming one in Toronto. I always tell them, I'm like, hey, when you need the guy that talks about racing games, hit me up and I'll join. I'll video chat into the podcast here for
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
you.
you find a niche gaming market. Anyways, go ahead.
So, but yeah, I think that's a pretty good little quick background. I think on each of us, and kind of going through a bit of our auto hobbies. I guess as if it wasn't already obvious enough before, but I'll specify for anyone that somehow missed it. If you can't already tell from the ownership histories and such, Jeremy leans a little bit more domestic, particularly in the route of Mustangs.
Mm-hmm.
And I lean a little bit more JDM in the way of both Mazdas, but I also love like 90s JDM culture, things like that. But I don't think either of us are really biased to cars per se, where I think each of us enjoy and appreciate vehicles from really any country or continent. I don't think we're
Yeah.
purists a lot where I only build Hondas or I only do, Ford found on road dead, GM to like for life. We're not, I don't think either of us are really those people.
No.
So hopefully through this show, any of you guys listening, like you can expect hopefully as unbiased of an opinion as we can bring. And obviously it's still our subjective thoughts here, but at the end of the day,
Yes.
it's definitely not going to be a pure show. So if you're not a fan of, S197 Mustangs, or you're not a fan of, first gen Mazda Speed 3s, you're still easily going to be able to listen to this podcast. Anyone that I think knows anything about cars will be happy to listen
Oh
to
yeah.
this. Continue to broach a mix of topics for sure.
Of course. Of course. That's what we're here. We're here to please the younger, maybe even a little older car enthusiast. I mean, that's basically what we are. We are car enthusiasts. We're younger car enthusiasts. We're really, really into this business of car stuff, and I don't think anybody has really done something like this before. It's just sort of a little niche group of people. I mean, it's really rare when you find somebody to talk about cars with, and Ben was pretty special. It was pretty special to find a guy like Ben.
Exactly. I made the joke I think with you once that I found you because Trent was the same way as my journalism department. There was one other kid that knew a bunch about cars. No one else cared about them, and then one other kid was just as passionate about them too. So I'm like, oh, thank God, I
It's
found
like, oh,
one.
thank God.
Yeah, exactly. I find it's easy to find what I like to call selective enthusiasts, which are people that are very particular to a brand or particularly to their own car. So you get a guy that he has a lifted Ram pickup truck and he knows a lot about his lifted Ram pickup truck, but he doesn't know anything about competitors. He doesn't know about the off road segment. He doesn't know about anything about tuner cars, Lambos, or anything. Like a lot of people I find are knowledgeable about a car they own that they're modifying. I personally really like to try to know a lot about every car. I'm curious about the industry more than I am about a specific vehicle.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's really where it gets tricky to find people that know cars. Even at work, when I've met people that are like, "Oh, I also have a car," and then they'll show you a picture, and it's like a poorly modified Civic or something, and you ask what
Yeah.
engine's in it, and they don't even know the answer, and then you're like, "Oh, well, you're like," I don't want to be mean and say that that doesn't make you an enthusiast because that's not necessarily what I'm saying, but there's just levels I think of knowledge, and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
also
Like
levels of
there's
interest.
yeah
I
levels
think a
of
lot of
interest in. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying a lot of people that have very preliminary interest on cars just aren't interested in having these kinds of conversations. They couldn't record for 3 hours about like vehicle background and stuff. They'd just be like, "I drive this. I used to drive this," and that's kind of
And that's
it.
kind of where their knowledge sort of stops. Yeah. Yeah. I know a lot of those people.
Yeah, exactly. Same. I particularly people that even might have a decent amount of knowledge on their own car. I know a lot of people that have done great thorough builds on their own personal vehicles, but they know very little about any other make and model of car. They just know a lot about building their own cars. Particularly the more mechanically inclined people that just learn a lot about their car by the nature of fixing it all over time, versus
Yeah.
people like me where I'm reading car reviews. I've got Motor Trend subscriptions. I'm following like 15 guys on YouTube. Things that the normal person doesn't necessarily do.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I pretty much do the same thing. I don't go as far as subscriptions, but I definitely do follow like a lot of people on YouTube and even reviewers on Instagram and stuff like that. And when I do see news pop up about a certain vehicle, especially if it's like really special, like the like we were talking about last week, the Subaru BRZ. Oh, did I get that right? Yes, I did. I did. The new Subaru BRZ. I was quick to read all the information and the stats that they had for it. Right, that car was genuinely interesting to me because I was super stoked about it. I was excited to see what they were doing with it. I knew that they were redesigning it. I was okay with the previous design. I just wanted to see what they could do. Like I wanted to see how they would depart from that old, um, you know, design language, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
I think that was probably a pretty good introduction on each of us, though. A nice another solid episode. I don't know if this is going to be the average time per se we're
I
recording
know.
this, but we've had some pretty in-depth ones the last couple of weeks. Well, I mean, again, we're early on here, so we'll continue to trim accordingly to what size we want it to be, or we'll begin to learn to and be able to sense based off how big we make the dock, how long it's going to run, and that stuff that just comes with time. For anyone that is already listening, or anyone that sees this stuff, feel free to leave us comments, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. Any critiques, input you guys want to leave. If you'd rather the podcast, do you like the long format like this? Would you rather these be shorter? For anyone who might have listened to the first one, then went to this, how do you like the video format? This
Yeah.
is our first try doing on camera presence here with Jeremy and me, and the screen sharing attempt. I think, especially if we can really over time get good at doing that screen sharing, I think that'll be a nice addition for people listening to the pod, or not, I guess listening, but watching the podcast. So you can get those tie-ins for things like the F1 Crasher, seeing our own personal vehicles, Jeremy being able to show those photos of the Mustang through the years, and me with my old cars.
And hey, if one of you might notice that I'm moving my mic around a lot, if you think that that is stupid and that it should stay in one place, and maybe if you want to see my face better, hi. Then let me know. Let us know if there are any little things that we're doing that maybe come off as wrong, or maybe you think we can try to do a little bit better. Then by all means, let us know. I mean, that we're still growing as a podcast, and we value any sort of input.
Yeah, any
Because yeah,
constructive criticism. Yeah, exactly. We're still growing. We're new. Again, it's episode 2. We're not professionals at this in any means, nor do we try
no,
to be. It's not like this is a company led by a bunch of people. We're just two students doing this in our, I guess we'll call it spare time.
yeah,
The social construct that is spare time. But
spare time.
thank
Yes.
you, thank you, readings I'm just not doing for this week. But the this is the life, it's going to be a bit of a garbage truck on fire in the wise words of a podcast series I follow, for a little while, but yeah, hopefully we continue to improve. And yeah, anyone listening or following along, feel free to write in comments, questions, inputs, constructive criticism, anything like that. um, Maybe hopefully once we start getting a more consistent audience too, we can start involving people more in regards to topics or questions, things like that. um, Obviously, anyone that has questions for us, we are happy to read out. The bright side of being on a grassroots podcast like this, if anyone does find us and follows along, write in, say something. There's like a
Yeah.
99.9% chance it'll get read because we have no one writing. So
Yeah.
your comment's going to get right to the top.
Yeah.
That's the trade off of listening to Joe Rogan or something. You're not going to be able to slide into his DMs. But obviously, we're busy, but we're not famous or anything, so we're open to communication. Any sort of stuff you guys want to input, and yeah, well, as much as this podcast is for us, obviously, as an output and something to do, it's also for anyone out there that's listening and kind of wants to learn more about
Yeah.
us, learn more about cars, whatever. Anyone that's on the student side of things too, I think we're gonna we've talked about it before, I think, but it's a student lens, a student focused podcast. We're showing that perspective of the struggling student trying to be a part of arguably the most expensive hobby out there.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like we're showing you two extremes. Like Ben Bell is out in London. There, he needs to drive. I live in Toronto, and it's almost like it's super expensive to drive here. Like they're making
yeah,
Toronto, like they're building Toronto so that we can't, or like us car enthusiasts can barely drive around or have that hobby. It's really expensive. But I don't know about you, Ben. I mean, you can probably
yeah.
speak more to this.
Yeah, Toronto, having a car there, it's particularly once you're outside of the core, or once you're inside the core of the city, it's not really designed to be super necessary. Toronto has infamously horrible traffic, a lot of congestion. You really don't want to be in your own car when you get near the center of the city. The road conditions also aren't super indicative of like Lambos and things like that. The roads are rough enough. You don't really want to be in performance vehicles.
Hmm.
Um, and as Jeremy kind of said, like the city's kind of designed to encourage you out of it a little bit. It's very expensive finding parking, finding permanent spots, finding overnight, finding street in downtown. Versus, yeah, a place like here, like London, where now that I'm in the city, I grew up out of town, but now that I'm living in the city, there is a bus route by my house, but I do with my job. I also am a support worker, which essentially means that certain days I'm not the one driving our delivery trucks. I'm following people in my own car. So I get paid mileage to drive my own vehicle around at work too. I put 2,700 kilometers, I think, last summer on my Jetta, driving around for just work. So I do need a vehicle. It's an absolute necessity for me. My dad lives in just outside of Toronto. Obviously, again, I go to school up there, so I will be in next year. I will be commuting a bit further. So yeah, it's an interesting little dichotomy between the two of us. Same thing with, I think it's kind of the nice thing about us having different ages as well. Jeremy at the more start of his driving career, me obviously not anywhere near the end, but I'm a few years into it now. And yeah, I've been driving for just about coming up on 8 years now, in a month or two. So yeah, it's kind of a cool mixture, I think.
Yeah. It's I think it's I would say it's probably the best mix of two kinds of enthusiasts where one is, before getting the big car and making the big choice to buying cars. I sound terrible. I know it's because it's late and getting tired, but it be that way sometimes. Really do
We
be.
we there we had a class this morning for those who are listening in, so it's been a long day,
Oh, it's
and
well,
it's
actually, I've been working my ass off on the final assignment.
gonna
For
say
those again who don't know, for that class as well, we were working on our finals, and I was working on it until I'd say up to the point when it was due. So
yeah,
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 that
and
is the life we're living these days.
so basically, my point was it's good to have both perspectives of two different kinds of car guys, because I'm nowhere near right now to getting my own car, but I'm getting closer, and you have one, so you can offer up perspective on what a car guy could do or should do, and I could just sort of jump into it and tell you the process, right, and
Yeah,
lean into that.
exactly. I've done the dumb moves with a car. I've bought the cars you shouldn't have bought. I've learned from buying and selling how I could do maybe an episode even on what to look out for in a used car from stuff I've looked at from trying to purchase vehicles. Definitely some things I have some experience on, and that's also why I'm really excited to try and eventually down the road start getting some of our friends or other people that maybe want to come on the podcast in. I'm excited. I know one or two of my friends that are very mechanically inclined, engine builders, diesel mechanics, things like that, have talked about coming on, and I think that'll be another cool third perspective because as much as I know about a lot about vehicles, I'm not the most mechanically inclined person. I've helped do engine pulls. I've done basic maintenance. Like I said earlier, I did an oil change on my own car. I know how to work on a car to a certain degree, but I'm not going to look at an international dump truck and be like, oh, this needs
Hmm.
a valve gasket because it's making this noise on that. Like I can't tell that stuff, or I'm not going to be the guy
Hmm.
that's like, oh yeah, I did an engine swap last month in my driveway on my Firebird. Like I just don't have the inclination nor the drive to get that deep into my own car. And I have a lot of friends that do have that drive. So I think that'll also be a cool little added perspective we can
Yeah.
eventually get. Some of my friends that are mechanics at dealers are some of my favorite people to talk to because, like, one of my friends that was a Ford tech for a while, for example, I know when the new Escapes came out, I asked him, hey, those new 1.5s, they went from a 1.5 to a 1.5. They used to be a 4 cylinder. Now they're a 3 cylinder. I said, how are the 3 cylinders? And he looked at me down the eye and he said, well, let's look at it this way. We started taking delivery of these 3 weeks ago. I've rebuilt 3 engines already. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not the greatest sign. And,
No.
and techs are the best for that to be like, oh, it always oil starves because the bearing in this cylinder, like they're really good at noticing because obviously they're disassembling these things all the time. They can clearly tell and isolate when the issues occur and what the issues are.
Hmm. Well, it'll be nice to have those additional perspectives if we do get them. I certainly hope we will. I know you have a bunch of eager friends who would love to come in and talk about car stuff for as many hours as we can go on for. I'm sure we may end up doing two-part episodes with these people because I'm sure they have plenty of stories.
Yeah, if anything, they could be their own full guest interview as a separate episode, and then another with them on a regular one. Like they'll probably have some pretty good stuff to talk about. Hopefully, either we can get them through, as we smooth out the podcast over time, and things return to normal, or if some of them have podcast setups at home where they have a decent enough mic, they can maybe call in through the COVID life because right now it's a little tricky to get people anywhere in person for hosting podcasts,
Hmm.
obviously.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it is definitely a challenge, and we're working through what's happening right now. I mean, it's a crazy time, but I'm
It
glad
is.
that it's fantastic. I love doing this with Ben. It's always exciting to get down to do this. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's a nice thing that keeps your brain active without being the dullness that is schoolwork or something like that. It's a nice way to kind of stay engaged in the auto world, and especially again during this crazy time of COVID, I can't go hang out with car friends. I don't go to my car club meets as often as I used to.
Hmm.
So there's not those moments where I can just talk shop with people for hours on end. That's just not something that happens as often. So it's nice that we have
Yeah.
this outlet to do similar things, and that's why we invite you guys at home, anyone watching, to join along with us and be on this journey as well. You don't have you do you like a lot about cars and you don't have car friends? Well, join us here and engage with the community. Hopefully, we can build this to be a group of cool students and people of any other age, really, that just are like-minded individuals that enjoy some vehicles and talk and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for tuning into this episode of Gears and Grades, the student driven podcast. I am your co host, Jeremy Honess. Ben Bell over there. Do you have anything to say?
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for another long-winded episode here. Hopefully, we'll see if we break the 2 hour mark again next week, or will we break the 3 hour mark? We'll never know. Stay tuned to find out.
Stay tuned to find out, guys. Thanks again, and stay safe. And we look forward to expanding this podcast together with you guys, because I know that both of us are very excited to see where this goes. And yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again, guys. Stay safe and wear a mask.
of course, yes. Like I said at the very beginning, wear a mask.
Yeah, don't be a little inner plug for us Humber students from Etobicoke. Don't be an Adamson barbecue wear.
Oh,
Thank you very much
goodness.
for joining us, everyone,
Thank
this
you
week.
very much for
We'll
joining
see you
us.
next week.
See you
Take
next
care.
week. Take care. Bye bye.